The first thing I felt was wine. Not the taste of it. The smell, soaked into silk, into hair, into the wood of a low table that my forehead was currently pressed against. The second thing I felt was a girl's hand in mine, soft and small, trying to tug my fingers out from under a wine cup I had apparently been clinging to like a man drowning at sea. The third thing I felt was the weight of an entire other life slotting itself into the back of my skull like a key turning in a lock. I opened my eyes. The room swam. Red lanterns. Painted screens. The faint twang of a pipa being plucked somewhere behind a curtain. A pair of slippered feet moving past in the corridor. The smell of incense and powder and old wine. I had been to the Quanua pavilion exactly 17 times in the last 2 months. My memory informed me, helpfully, and on every visit I had drunk myself face down into this exact table. Except I had never been here. Not really. Not the eye that was currently looking out of these eyes. I sat up very slowly. The girl beside me, Anyang, the memory said, dancer from Suzhou, 23, fond of Xie Yuan because Xie Yuan tipped well and never bruised her, made a soft, startled sound as I disengaged my hand from hers. Master Xie, she whispered, the night is still long. It is not, I said. I did not recognize my own voice. It came out lower than I expected, with a careless edge to it that did not belong to me, but to the body. The body was 21. The body was handsome in the kind of way that got a man into trouble. High straight nose, slow dark eyes, a mouth that smiled too easily and too crooked. The body had not slept enough, had not eaten enough, and had certainly drunk too much for too many nights in a row. The body's name was Xie Yuan, second son, sole legitimate heir, of the Marquis of Yuan. Soft, spoiled, useless. The man inside the body, was not. My last real memory was a wet road, and a horn screaming and headlights coming the wrong way. Then nothing. Then this. I had spent the better part of a misspent youth reading old histories, schemers, advisors, court politics, every cunning man my dead world had ever produced. I had spent 1,000 idle nights thinking what I would have done if. Maybe a god somewhere had been listening. Maybe a god somewhere had heard one too many of my drunken declarations to the ceiling about how I would have handled the 3 kingdoms better than any of those clowns, and had finally decided to call my bluff. Here I was then, and here, my new memories told me, was a problem. In 3 nights a man with a curved foreign blade would come over the back wall of the Quanua pavilion and put 8 inches of steel into Xie Yuan's ribs while he slept off a hangover. The man would be paid 60 taels of silver by a runner of someone who, with a little patience, could be traced back to one Lady Sue, the Marquis's second wife, who hated her stepson with a small, clean hatred that had been growing in her chest for 14 years. Lady Sue's reasons were simple. Xie Yuan was the heir. Her own son, Xielang, was not. Xie Yuan would have died not knowing any of this. He would have died thinking some random brigand got lost in the wrong corner of the city. I, in his body, knew. Anyang, I said gently, bring me tea. The bitter kind, not the kind for guests. She tilted her head, surprised by the softness in my voice. Xie Yuan never said please. Xie Yuan called for more wine and slapped her thigh and laughed. I watched the recalibration move across her face and reminded myself to be careful. Not yet. Not for a few days. Let the playboy stay drunk a little longer in everyone's mind, including hers. I smiled, the lazy, crooked smile his memory provided, and ruined the moment by chucking her under the chin. Bitter tea, sweet girl. I am going to need to think clearly in the morning. You never think clearly in the morning, Master Xie. Then this, I said, will be a fine new habit. She giggled and slipped out through the curtain. I let the smile go. Behind it my face must have settled into something very still and very young and very tired. 3 nights. 3 nights to live, or 3 nights to start over. I leaned back, closed my eyes, began to count. By the time the bitter tea arrived, I had made a short list. I had 3 nights before a man came over the wall. I had a stepmother who would not stop trying until I was buried and her son was tying the heir's belt around his waist. I had a father, Marquis Xie Yuan, who loved his first wife's memory and his second wife's body in roughly equal measure and could not be told anything directly about either. I had a half-brother, Xie Lang, 16 years old, who was not yet beyond saving but would be soon if Lady Su kept feeding him her particular soup of resentment. I had no friends I would trust with a kitchen knife, let alone my life. I had myself. I had a face people had stopped looking at carefully because they had decided years ago what it meant. That last item turned out to be the only one I needed. By the time I rode home through the gray pre-dawn streets of Bianjing, sliding off my horse into the arms of 2 impassive servants because the Xie Yuan they knew always slid off his horse, I had 3 plans laid out in my head, one inside the other, and the rough outlines of a much longer plan stretching out past them like a road into fog. I would not save myself by warning my father. I would not save myself by killing the assassin. I would save myself by making the assassin kill someone else, on Lady Su's coin, in a place she could not deny, in a way that pointed at her so clearly she would spend the next year of her life trying to stop her own household from looking at her too directly. It was not a clean plan. Clean plans always failed because they relied on people being clean. This one relied on people being exactly as filthy as I already knew them to be. Half a stone for birds. That was the first phrase I taught myself in this new life. I would say it many times, eventually. Other people would say it about me, eventually, in tones that ranged from admiration to terror to something quieter and more complicated. But the first time I thought it, I was alone in a courtyard at dawn, watching frost burn off the stones, and I thought it about Lady Su. Half a stone for birds. The assassin lives. I live. Lady Su loses her best knife. And the man she has been paying to feed Xie Lang those careful poisons of resentment, a steward named Old Du, who had served her since before her marriage, dies in a back alley. That last bird was for Xie Lang. The boy did not yet know he had been raised on a slow drip of his mother's hate for his father's first wife. He might never know. But Old Du, dead, was Lady Su's mouth into her son sealed shut. After that I would have a year. Maybe 2. Maybe enough. I drank the bitter tea. I went to bed. I slept with one hand on a knife under my pillow and the other hand draped loosely off the bed in case the assassin came tonight instead of in 3 days. He did not. He was a paid man. He came on the day he had been paid for. That was the first useful thing I learned about how people behaved in this dynasty. The clay always remembered the mold. In the morning I woke up, complained loudly about my head, ate 3 bowls of plain rice porridge to settle a stomach my new body did not actually need settled, and asked the chief steward, very offhandedly, where Old Du was these days, because the old fellow had once promised me a particular wine and I had never collected on it. The chief steward, who was old and tired and had long since decided that Xie Yuan was harmless, said Old Du was running errands for Lady Su in the South District most mornings and could probably be found at the 3 Sparrows tea house around the hour of the snake. I smiled lazily and forgot about it. I went to my room. I sat down at a black lacquer desk. I picked up a brush and I wrote a single line on a slip of paper. The man you were paid 60 for sleeps in his city house tonight, not the pavilion. The west wall is short. Old Du, 3 Sparrows tea house, hour of the snake. He carries the rest of your pay. I sealed the slip in plain paper. I gave it to a child who lived in the kitchens and was 3 coins richer than he had been an hour earlier. I told him very seriously which to take it to and which courier to give it to. I told him to forget my face on the way out. He forgot. Children always do, when you pay them well, and they are afraid of grown-up business. The assassin received the slip that afternoon. The assassin had not been paid the second half of his 60 taels because Lady Su's man had told him quite truthfully that the rest would come once the job was done. The assassin had also been told that the heir, Xie Yuan, was a soft drunk who slept face down at the Quanyue pavilion and would never know what hit him. The assassin, like most paid men, did not love changes to a plan. But the slip was very clear, and the slip mentioned the rest of his pay, and the slip mentioned a tea house where the contact who carried the rest of his pay could be reached early. He did not bother to verify because he did not need to. The note had come folded inside an envelope with the right seal on it. The right seal had come from my room. The right seal had come from my hand. Working from the memory of seals Xie Yuan had idly drawn for months because he was a bored boy who liked pretty marks. The assassin went to the Three Sparrows tea house at the hour of the snake. He found old Dew, the lean, pinched old steward with the small dark eyes and the trembling hands of a man who had spent 40 years in service to people who were unkind to their servants. Old Dew was not happy to see him. The assassin asked, "Lo, where the rest of the money was." Old Dew, who knew nothing of being paid more, who knew only that he had been told to deliver a small purse and a verbal acknowledgement to the runner the next afternoon, not to a paid blade in broad daylight at a tea house, panicked. Old Dew tried to leave. The assassin, being a paid man with a sudden suspicion he was being cut out of his contract, did what paid men do. The body of Old Dew was found in the alley behind the Three Sparrows tea house before sundown. There was a knife wound under his ribs. There was a small purse of silver in his sleeve that should not have been there. There were 2 witnesses, both tea house boys, who could swear they had seen Old Dew arguing with a stranger of a particular description, tall, thin, foreign-style sword, Eastern accent. The city watch took the body and the purse and the witnesses and trudged off into their report. The assassin, who had a sudden bad feeling about the whole arrangement, took the silver from Old Dew's sleeve as partial payment, removed himself from the city by nightfall, and never came back. I knew he would not come back because I had paid a second courier, with money I had quietly siphoned out of the household accounts using the Playboy signature, to deliver a separate slip to the same in telling the assassin that the rest of his contract had been canceled, that he had been double-crossed, and that the family of his original target now knew his name. It was a small, mean message. It was meant to make him run, not to tell the truth. He ran. Lady Sue, sitting in her green pavilion in our compound that evening, was told her old retainer had been found dead in a tea-house alley. I watched her face from across the courtyard, lounging against a pillar with a wine cup I had not yet drunk from. She did not see me. She was looking at the messenger, and she was looking past him, and she was doing arithmetic. Lady Sue was a precise woman. She knew exactly how much she had paid, to whom, for what. She knew her retainer should not have been at that tea house, should not have been carrying that money, should not have been talking to anyone wearing a foreign blade. She did the arithmetic, and she came up with a sum that frightened her. That was the look I had wanted. I took a sip of the wine. It was bad wine. Xie Yuan had always bought bad wine because he never tasted any of it. I made a mental note to start tasting things. Then I pushed off the pillar and walked off, humming, the picture of a son going to his evening's amusements, and I left her there in her green pavilion with a face she did not yet know how to arrange. That night, I did not sleep at the pavilion. I slept in a small inn on the south side of the river, alone, in a room with 2 ways out. The next morning, I sent word to my father that I had quarreled with a friend and stayed at his house. The Marquis did not ask. The Marquis never asked. 3 days passed. No assassin came over any wall. The watch closed the Old Dew case as an unsolved street robbery. Lady Sue did not raise her eyes to me at dinner. I had 3 things now I had not had a week ago. I had time. I had her fear. I had the beginning of a face I could use. The face was the most important of those 3. A great deal had been written, in the books of my dead world, about how a man should appear to be a fool in order to survive a court. I had read most of it and laughed at most of it because most of it was written by men who had never tried it. The problem with appearing to be a fool is that people will treat you like a fool. They will hand you a fool's portions. They will give a fool's bride a fool's bed. The kingdom of fools is a small kingdom, and you cannot rule from inside it. I did not want to appear to be a fool. I wanted to appear to be exactly what Xie Yuan had been for 21 years. A beautiful, lazy, slightly sad young man who was going to disappoint his father gracefully and forever. The difference, the only difference, was that under the lazy I was going to be doing the slow, patient work of someone setting a city on fire from the basement, and no one was going to look down into the basement until it was already too hot. For that I needed three things. I needed information. I needed people. I needed reasons that would let me move openly through a court that despised second sons of declining marquisates. The information came first because the information was cheapest. I knew, from Xie Yuan's memories, that the Quanyue Pavilion was not the best establishment in the South District. The best establishment in the South District was a much quieter place called the Hall of Mountain and Water, 3 streets over, where the songstresses were trained from childhood to read poetry, write letters, and listen. I had not yet been there because Xie Yuan had not yet been able to afford the door fee. The door fee was 300 taels. Xie Yuan's monthly allowance from the Marquis was 20. I borrowed 500 taels from my father's accounts using a steward's seal. I had spent 2 days teaching my hand to copy. I did not steal it. I left a chit of paper noting the loan and the date it would be returned, signed in my own name, in a drawer that the senior accountant checked once a season. If anyone questioned me about it later, I would say, with perfect truth, that I had borrowed it openly and intended to repay, and I would repay it before anyone bothered to check. The risk was small. The shield was real. I went to the Hall of Mountain and Water in plain clothes, paid the door fee, and asked for the songstress whose name had been most carefully kept out of common gossip. Her name, when she came into the small reading room and set down a tray of tea with hands that did not shake, was Xie Yuan. She was 25 years old. She had been the favorite of the previous Minister of Rights until that minister had died of a sudden fever 6 months ago. She had not taken a new patron since because she did not need one. She had a small house in a respectable neighborhood, a maidservant of her own, and a small soft network of women in 5 other houses of the same quality who passed her any piece of pillow talk worth a coin. She charged for her conversation, not for anything else. Her conversation was very expensive. She looked at me, in my plain clothes, and her eyes did a long, careful sweep that began at my soft scholar's shoes, traveled up over the unfamiliar plainness of my outer robe, and stopped at my face. Her face did not change. "Master Xie," she said. "Not young Master Xie. Not heir Xie. Just Master Xie," said in a tone that did not pretend not to know me, but did not bow to it either. "Lady Qingwan," I said, "I came as plainly as I could so that I would not embarrass you. You cannot embarrass me, master. You can only embarrass yourself. That is a comfort." She poured tea. She did not invite me to sit, which meant she expected me to sit on my own without needing to be invited, which I did. "You will tell me why you came," she said. "To buy 3 things. Speak them. 3 months of your time, on the days I name. The freedom to use your name and your house when I need a meeting that should not be recorded. And the answer to one specific question, before I leave today, paid for at twice the rate of anything else I will ask you for in those 3 months." She set the teapot down. There are people who, when they realize that the world has just shifted slightly under them, will lean forward, and there are people who lean back. Xie Yuan leaned back. Her shoulders relaxed against the cushion behind her, which meant her arms were free, which meant she was a woman who had been in rooms before that turned dangerous and had learned to keep her arms free for them. "You are not Xie Yuan," she said, finally. "I am. You are not the Xie Yuan I have heard about. I am the Xie Yuan you will hear about. Tell no one, please. That is not a question I can answer with my mouth." "Then answer it with your face," I said. "If you nod at this point, I will pay you the 3 months in advance and leave my question for next visit. If you do not, I will leave the door fee at the front desk as a gift to the house and go drink myself stupid at the Quanyue." She looked at me for a long count of breaths. She nodded. I paid the 3 months. I left. I came back 4 days later and asked the question. "Who?" I said. is Pei Wuxia, and why is the second prince so afraid of his last advisor's last advisor? She set the teacup down. You will need, she said quietly, more than 3 months. Then I will buy more. She looked at me, and for the first time in our short acquaintance she smiled. It was a small, very controlled smile, with no warmth in it, and no malice either, like a kind of recognition. Pei Wuxia, she said, is going to kill you, Master Xie. Or you are going to kill him. I am not sure which, yet, but I am certain there is no other ending. Then start at the beginning, I said, and poured the tea myself for the first time in this new life, because I had wanted to sit in this woman's house and ask for an enemy's history without flinching, and I had wanted, very privately, to know whether my hand would shake. It did not shake. I learned what I needed to know. Pei Wuxia was 26 years old. He had been brought into Bianjing 8 years before, the adopted son of the Pei family of Yangzhou, which had no other surviving heirs. The Peis had not always been a wealthy family, but they had become one when Wuxia was 13, in the way families sometimes do when a child of theirs turns out to have a particular kind of patience. By the time he came up to the capital at 18, he had passed the imperial examinations at the top of his year. By 20, he was a censor. By 23, he was an undersecretary in the Ministry of War. By now, 26, he was nominally a deputy in the Bureau of Court Records, an unimportant office, which meant of course that he had become important enough to need to hide. He served the second prince, Yin Wei. He had served him for 4 years. In those 4 years, for senior officials who had stood in the second prince's way had retired, died of fevers, lost their estates to land suits, or fallen out of windows. None of them had died with Pei Wuxia's name on a single sheet of paper anywhere. He was tall, Mu Qing once said. Almost too tall. He had a long pale face and a mouth that smiled easily, and when he stood in a room, he stood very still. He read at least 3 languages. He did not drink. He did not gamble. He had no women. He had, she said carefully, one young man. Chao Yi, a guard captain of the Imperial Guard, slim, hard-eyed. The kind of soldier who had become a soldier because the alternative was something worse, who had been at his side for 6 years and who did not leave his house most nights. Is it known? I asked. It is known, she said. It is not spoken. Does the second prince know? The second prince knows everything about everyone except himself. Does Pei Wuxia love Chao Yi? She paused for the first time. He loves him, she said. That is enough for now, I said. Move on. I should not have asked the question. I had asked the question because I needed to know whether the man had a weakness I could use later, and I had needed to know whether he held that weakness lightly or heavily, and I had gotten my answer in her pause. He held it heavily. That was important. I filed it in the careful place in my head where I kept things I would not use until I had to. Tell me what he wants, I said. He wants the second prince on the throne and himself behind him. That is what an advisor wants. I am asking what Pei Wuxia wants. She looked at me sideways. He wants to win, she said. At what? At everything. He wants to win at everything, Master Xie. He does not particularly enjoy his prince. He does not particularly hate the crown prince. He does not love or hate the fourth prince. He looked at the board when he was 19 years old, and he chose his color, and he has not lifted his eyes from the board since. He does not want a kingdom. He wants to be the man who arranges a kingdom. The second prince is his color of stone. The throne is his 19th move. And when the 19th move is played, then he chooses the 20th and the 21st and the 22nd. He does not get bored. He does not get tired, she said. I tapped the rim of my teacup once, twice. Then I set it down. All right, I said. Find me a way into a room where he will be. That is easily done. He will be at the cold pool banquet in 11 days. Half the city will be there. You will be invited because you are your father's son. Good. Make sure I am seated where I can see him without him noticing for as long as possible. 3/4 of an hour, if you can. I want to look at him before he looks at me. That can be arranged. And then arrange, I said, for him to look at me. She smiled again. It was the same small smile. How? I will think of something between now and then. Be ready to do it on my signal. I am ready. I paid her. I left. In 11 days I would meet my enemy. Before then, I needed an army. I did not yet have one. I had a stepmother who feared me, a father who did not see me, a half-brother who could be salvaged, a songstress who could be paid, and a body that had been wasted for years. I started with the body. I will not bore you with the months of training, because I did not have months. I had 11 days. What I had instead of training was an old man. His name was Master Bo. He had been a sword instructor in my father's household for 36 years. He had taught my father and my uncles, all of whom had become bad swordsmen, and he had given up. By the time I was old enough to lift a sword, Master Bo was a small, sour, dried-out man with a permanent stoop who corrected the postures of the household guards once a week and otherwise drank pear wine in a hut at the back of the third courtyard. I found him at dusk on the day after I left Xie Yuan's. He was sitting outside his hut on a stool, peeling the rind off a winter pear with a knife that was 3 times older than I was and twice as sharp. He looked up when my shadow fell across his hands. "Master Bo," I said. He looked at me with the resigned patience of a man who has been bored for 2 decades. "Young master, I would like to learn the sword." He resumed peeling. "You would like," he said, "many things. I have heard several of them. The dancer with the red ribbon, the white horse from the Liao traders, the drunken 8 immortals wine from the Wei brothers, the boots with the gold embroidery. None of them required me. I would like to learn the sword," I said, "from you, this evening, for 1 hour. Tomorrow evening, for 1 hour. The night after, for 1 hour. For 11 nights. After that I will let you decide whether to continue." He set the knife down. "You are not drunk," he said. "No. Young Master Xie is always drunk. Always. Even at the New Year, when his father told him not to be drunk for 1 day. Especially then. I am not drunk this evening." He looked at me. He looked at me much longer than I had expected. He was a small, dried-out man, and his eyes were the small, dried-out eyes of someone who had spent a long time learning that nothing changed, but they were not stupid eyes. He was looking at the new shape of me. "Sit down," he said. I sat down on the second stool he had not been using. "Tell me a thing," he said. "Why 11 nights?" "Because in 12 nights I have to look at a man across a room, and I do not yet know how to stand straight enough to do it." Standing straight is not a sword art. It is the only sword art that matters for what I need. He took up the pear again. He cut a slice and offered it to me on the flat of the old knife. I took it. 1 hour each evening," he said. "Yes. I will not go easy on you because you are the Marquis' son. I do not want you to go easy. You will hurt for the next 11 days. I will hurt anyway. I would prefer to hurt usefully." He nodded once. I stood up. He stood up. He did not put me through sword work that first evening. He put me through standing. Just standing. For an hour. Hands at my sides. Knees slightly bent. Feet at a specific angle. Spine in a specific line. Chin in a specific place. I was sweating by the end of the 3rd minute. My calves were trembling by the end of the 10th. By the end of the hour, I could not feel my feet, and Master Bo informed me, without sympathy, that I was now standing correctly for the first time in my life, and that we would do this again tomorrow, and the day after, and every day until I could stand correctly without thinking about it. By the 7th day I could. By the 7th day, I could also see the room. That is the part that no one had ever told me about, in any book, in either of the 2 lives I had now lived. When a man does not know how to stand, he does not know how to see. He looks at the floor when he is at rest, and he looks at the ceiling when he is excited, and he looks at the face of whoever has spoken last when he is in a conversation, because his attention follows sound. But when a man knows how to stand, he can keep his eyes anywhere he wants, and he can keep them there for as long as he wants. And the room, the entire room, opens up around him, like a flower opening above water. By the 7th day I could stand in a corner of my own courtyard, and tell you which of the servants was about to drop a tray before the tray was dropped, and which of the maids had been crying that morning, and which corner of the south wall had moved a quarter inch in the last storm. I could not do this with any kind of mystical sense. I could do it because for the first time in 2 lives I had stopped staring straight ahead at whatever was loudest. That, I decided, was the only sword art I would ever need. On the 11th night, Master Bo gave me a wooden practice sword and told me to swing it 8 times. I swung it 8 times. He nodded once and took it back from me and told me not to swing a real one until he said I could. I told him I would not. He told me to come back the night after the banquet, and we would talk about what to learn next. I told him I would. I went home. I bathed. I slept. I did not dream. In the morning, my chief steward laid out my best blue silk for the cold pool banquet, and I led him. The cold pool banquet was held every year on the night of the first new moon after the spring equinox. It was hosted, by tradition, in the Garden of 12 Bridges on the north edge of the Imperial Palace grounds. The garden was famous for one thing only, a pool, ringed with willows, whose water came up from an underground spring so deep that even in the hot months it ran cold. Lanterns floated on the pool. Boats no bigger than tea trays drifted on it. Servants in pale gray walked along the willowed paths with trays of food on their forearms. The court came in their best silks and their second-best smiles. Music was played from 3 pavilions placed at the 3 points of a triangle around the water, so that wherever you stood at least one strain of music reached you, and wherever you whispered at least one strain of music reached the whisper too. I came in pale blue with silver embroidery. I came alone. I came late, but not so late as to be insulting. Exactly half an incense stick after the hour the invitation requested. I let myself be seen by the people who needed to see me. My father, briefly, who blinked twice because I had not bowed crookedly and had not been carried in. Lady Sue, distantly, who did not allow her face to do anything at all when our eyes met across the lacquered tables. Xie Lang, my half-brother, who was 16 and uncertain in a robe slightly too big for him, who looked surprised that I had nodded at him, which surprised me in turn because I had nodded at him by reflex and not strategy. I would have to think about that later. I let myself be seen by the people I needed. I did not let myself look at the man on the eastern side of the pool. He had arrived earlier than I had. He was standing, not seated, on a small stone bridge that crossed one arm of the pool, in a robe of dark green so dark it was almost black, with a single white crane embroidered on the back. His sleeves were tied at the cuffs in a soldier's knot, which was not soldier's fashion in this court, and so was a choice. His hair was bound up under a plain dark band. He had a teacup in his right hand. He was speaking to a fat man whose face I knew from Xie Yuan's careful descriptions, the minister of the right, who was the second prince's primary patron in court. He was very tall. He stood very still. He smiled at the fat man without smiling with his eyes, and the fat man laughed at whatever he said and bowed slightly forward and went on laughing as he walked away. The fat man laughed in the way men laugh when they have just been complimented on a thing they did not quite want complimented. I did not look at him. I went to the seat Xie Yuan had arranged for me, half hidden by a willow's drift, with a clear line of sight at his back. I sat. I accepted a wine cup from a passing servant and did not drink it. I looked at the lanterns on the pool. For 3/4 of an hour, I let myself watch him without watching him. He spoke to 7 people in that time. 5 he dismissed within 4 sentences. 2 he kept for longer, the minister of the right, again, and a young scholar in dark red who I did not recognize and would have to ask about. He never raised his voice. He never gestured with the cup. He stood with his weight even on both feet, like Master Bo had taught me 3 nights ago, and his head turned without his shoulders moving. He was looking at the room the way I had begun to look at rooms. That, more than anything, was when I felt the small cold thing settle in my stomach. He was not going to be easy. I noted it. I let it sit. I had been told by Xie Yuan that I would have a signal. I had told her, 3 days earlier, what the signal would be. I had asked her to arrange one small, specific thing. A particular songstress, with a particular accent, would sing a particular line from a particular old poem from a particular pavilion at a particular time. That line, that accent, that pavilion, that time, none of them would mean anything to anyone in the garden except one man. That man had grown up in the South, in a county where that poem was a children's lullaby with one word changed for politeness. He would hear the original word. He would look up. He would look up before anyone in the garden looked up, because no one else in the garden would have any reason to. I would watch him look up. He would not know I was watching. And then, only then, I would walk past him on my way to nowhere, and his eyes would slide over me, and I would let them. That was the plan. The line came on time. The line came in the soft southern accent. The line came from the eastern pavilion. The original word was in. His head moved. Not the whole head. Just the chin, just a quarter-inch up and toward the eastern pavilion. He caught himself within a breath, and his chin came back down, and his face went back to whatever it had been. But for one breath I had seen the man under the face. I had to remember, for a moment, to also breathe. I rose. I tucked one hand into my sleeve, the way a slightly drunk young man tucks one hand into his sleeve because he has forgotten what to do with it. I let the other hang loose. I walked the long way around the pool toward the seat my father had been given near the north pavilion, choosing my path so that it carried me across the bridge where Pei Wuxia was standing. I did not look at him. He did not look at me, either, until I was past him, and then I felt his eyes on the back of my neck for 2 full steps before they let go. He had not recognized the signal as a signal. He had only recognized that someone in this garden had used a word in a song that almost no one in this garden would have used, and he had given himself away by reacting to it. And he had then made a small private note inside his own head to find out who had done it and why. He had also, I was fairly certain, made a small private note that the young man in pale blue who had crossed the bridge a moment after the song had been a Xie, had been the heir, had not bowed because he had not seen, and had walked with a step that was slightly steadier than the step of a young man who was supposed to be slightly drunk. He would think about that step for the rest of the evening. I bowed to my father. I bowed to the minister of the left. I accepted a comment about my robe from a third uncle. I sat down. I waited. I did not look at him. He looked at me 3 times in the next hour. I felt the looks the way you feel a shadow pass over the back of your shoulders on a sunny day. I did not turn. He let it go for the night. I let him let it go. By the end of the banquet, I had 3 things I had not had 11 days earlier. I had stood in the same garden as him. I had let him notice me without giving him a face to attach. I had begun, for the first time in 2 lives, to think of the next move as if I were the one who would play it, and not the one being played upon. Half a stone, for birds. I was already past the first stone. The next morning I went to court. I had been carried to court a handful of times before, in the days when Xie Yuan still pretended to want to be his father's heir. Each visit had been short, polite, and forgotten by everyone but the record keepers. I went to court this time because the Marquis of Pingyuan had a duty to present his heir at the spring audiences, and the Marquis had been told, in a quiet word from his chief steward, that the heir had asked to come. The Marquis had said yes because he had been too surprised to say no. I went in plain dark blue. I did not wear ornaments. I stood behind my father at the back of the noble ranks, hands folded in front of me, head bowed at the correct degree, eyes lowered to the correct line on the floor. I was there for one reason. I needed to know how the emperor breathed. The man on the throne was 63. He was called the Xuande Emperor. He had ruled the Great Yan for 31 years. He had outlived 3 empresses, for favored consorts, 2 crown princes, and an entire generation of his ministers. He had, in his youth, been a soldier. There had been a campaign on the western border that I knew of from history, in which a young Yin prince had ridden at the head of his own cavalry into a pass, and come out the other side with a victory and a scar across the bridge of his nose. The scar was still there. The young man was not. The Xuanda emperor was a tired old soldier who had been ruling a court of clerks for too long, and who hated half of them and trusted none of them, and could not yet decide which of his sons hated him least. He coughed twice during the audience. Once at the very beginning, when he sat. Once near the middle, when a memorial was read aloud about a flood in the southern provinces. I watched the cough. He covered his mouth with a white silk cloth on both occasions. The silk did not appear to come away stained. He drank tea twice. Once after each cough. He drank with his left hand, his right hand resting on the arm of the throne. He had, my memory informed me, been right-handed in his youth. His grip had weakened in the last year. Servants had begun setting his cup on the left side. He was old. He was not yet dying. He was leaning toward dying. I noted it. I let it sit. The second prince stood at the eastern side of the ranks, in dark gold. He was tall, taller than the crown prince by a thumb's width, and he wore his height the way some men wear a sword. He looked at the throne with a face arranged into the expected blend of filial worry and respectful attention. He looked at his elder brother, the crown prince, with a face arranged into nothing at all. He did not look at me. He had no reason to. The crown prince stood at the eastern side as well, slightly forward, in pale gold. He was thinner than I remembered from the rumors. He coughed too, once, midway through the audience. The cough was deeper than his father's. He covered it with his sleeve. He had no silk cloth ready, which surprised me, until I thought about it for a moment and realized, of course, a man who keeps a silk cloth ready for his own coughs is a man who has decided he is going to cough. The crown prince had not yet allowed himself to decide that. He would, eventually. I could already see the shape of the man he would become in the next year. The fourth prince stood at the eastern side too, behind the crown prince. He was small for a prince. He was 22, 2 years younger than I was supposed to be, and he was already developing the slight stoop of a man who has been bending over books since he was 8. He wore the plain dark blue of a working scholar. He had his hands folded in front of him in exactly the position I had folded mine. He did not look up at the throne, or at his brothers, or at the ministers. He was looking at the back of his own hands. That, I thought, was the one. I did not know why I thought it. I had told myself, before coming, that I would not pick a prince to back on the first audience. I had told myself I would wait, listen, learn. I had told myself many things. But when I saw the fourth prince standing behind his sicker brother and behind his sharper brother, with his hands folded in the same position as mine, looking at the back of his own hands, I knew I was going to back him. It was not a decision. It was a recognition. I filed it under things I had not yet earned the right to feel certain about, and I let it sit. Pei Wuxia was not at the audience. He had no rank that required him. He would be debriefed at his prince's residence later in the day. He would be told, by the prince's other men, that the Marquis of Xie Yuan had presented his heir today. He would ask the most obvious question, had the heir done anything notable? He would be told no. The heir had stood at the back, looking at the floor. He would not believe it. He would set a man to watch me. I would let the man watch me. I had 11 days to set the next stone. The salt affair began the way most things in this dynasty began, with money moving in a place it should not have moved. There were 3 salt monopolies in the Great Yin, the eastern coastal works at Linzi, the western interior works at Yongning, and the southern lake works at Wuxiang. The eastern was the largest, the western was the strangest, and the southern was the most corrupt. The southern was managed by a salt commissioner named Wei Hung, who had been confirmed to his post by the Minister of Revenue at the urging of the second prince's faction 5 years earlier. Wei Hung was a stout, plain, careful man who paid his bribes upward at perfect intervals and otherwise made enemies of no one. He was, from his patron's point of view, perfect. Wei Hung had a younger brother named Wei Bo. Wei Bo lived in Bianjing. Wei Bo had recently bought a 3rd town house in the most expensive ward of the capital. The 3rd town house had been paid for in cash. The cash had moved through 3 hands. The first hand was a clerk in the Bureau of Salt Receipts. The second hand was a wine merchant. The third hand was Wei Bo himself. I knew this because Xie Yuan had begun, in the 4 weeks since our first conversation, to teach me a kind of arithmetic I had not previously studied. It was the arithmetic of how rich men disguise large numbers as small ones and small numbers as no numbers at all. She did not teach me by giving me principles. She taught me by giving me one piece of paper a week with 23 small notes on it, none of which were obviously connected, all of which were connected, and asking me at the next meeting which 3 of them were the actual story. I had been wrong the first 2 weeks. I had been right the third. The third week was the Weibo notes. I went home from the Hall of Mountain and Water that evening, and I drew a map on a sheet of paper at my desk. The map was not of streets. It was of names. At the top of the map was the second Prince Yin Wei. Below him, slightly to the left, Pei Wuxia. Below them, branching down, 4 names of senior officials in the Ministry of War, 3 names in the Ministry of Revenue, and 1 name in the Ministry of Personnel. Each name had 2 or 3 lines leading down to lower names: clerks, bureau heads, traveling censors. Around the edge of the map, I had drawn a thin border of other names: silk merchants in Suzhou, salt commissioners in 3 districts, a captain of the city watch in Bianjing, a horse dealer in the western marches. Wei Hung was on the map. Weibo was on the map. The wine merchant who had laundered the cash was on the map. The clerk in the Bureau of Salt Receipts was on the map. I stared at the map for a long time. The second prince's faction was a beast with 2 tendons: money, which ran from the southern salt works up through the wine merchants and the silk traders and the urban clerks, and influence, which ran from the Ministry of War down through the captains of garrisons and up through the ear of the right ministers. Cut 1 tendon, and the beast limped. Cut both, and the beast was finished, but cutting both was the work of years, and I did not have years. I had the next 8 months, until the emperor's health declined too far for an orderly succession. I could cut the money tendon. The money tendon ran on Wei Hung. Wei Hung could not be touched directly because he was Wei Hung. He paid his bribes upward at perfect intervals. He kept no untidy mistresses. He had no children to embarrass him. Touching him directly would require either evidence of his crimes, which would have to be supplied by his patrons, who would never supply it, or a scandal so loud the patrons would have to disown him to save themselves. The first was impossible. The second was difficult. The second was, I decided, exactly difficult enough. Weibo, his younger brother, was the weak point. Weibo was vain and stupid and had recently bought a 3rd townhouse in cash. Weibo had no patron of his own. Weibo could be sacrificed. Half a stone, for birds. If I broke Weibo correctly. First, Wei Hung would have to defend his brother in court, which would put him in front of the censorate, where his own books would be opened, and his books, if I could prepare the censorate correctly, would not survive an honest reading. Second, the second prince's faction would lose the southern salt revenues for the year it took to install a replacement commissioner, which would dry up a substantial portion of the cash that paid for the prince's networks of small useful men. Third, the minister of the right, who had confirmed Wei Hang's post 5 years earlier, would have to spend his own credit defending the confirmation, which would weaken him just enough that the minister of the left, currently a careful old man named Gu Sui, who had, my memory told me, once been a tutor to the 4th prince, could quietly recover ground that had been lost during a previous reshuffle. Fourth, Pei Wuxia would have to react. I did not yet know how he would react. I wanted to see how he reacted. For birds, the half-stone was Wei Bo himself, who would be the one publicly destroyed, and Wei Bo deserved exactly half a stone. He had bribed his way into wealth. He had cheated 5 separate cousins out of their portions of an inheritance. And he had, 2 months earlier, beaten a maidservant to death in his 2nd town house because she had served him cold soup. The maidservant's family had been paid a small sum and told to be silent. The matter had been closed at the city watch level by a clerk who later turned out to be the brother-in-law of the wine merchant. I would not be sorry for Wei Bo. I needed 3 things to make it work. I needed a clerk in the Bureau of Salt Receipts who could be persuaded to make a copy of certain ledgers, then to vanish for 6 months. I needed a censor who would receive the copies and act on them without knowing where they had come from. I needed Wei Bo to commit one more crime, one specific crime, in a specific place, at a specific time, within the next 20 days, so that the censor's investigation would arrive on top of the crime instead of independently. The first was the work of money. Xie Yuan, through her network of women in 5 other houses, identified the clerk within a week. His name was Hani. He was 28, unmarried, in debt to a wine merchant for 90 taels, and his mother was sick in Hangzhou. We paid the debt. We sent 200 taels to his mother through an intermediary the clerk did not know. We sent him a note. The note said one sentence: "A man you do not know has paid your debts and has sent your mother 3 months of medicine. He will ask you for a favor in 3 days. The favor will not endanger you. The favor will, if performed, free you from your post. The man's name will never be told to you. You will say yes to the favor or no, but if you say no, you will return the medicine." He said yes. He did the work. He delivered the copies. He vanished. He is, last I heard, a small merchant in a small city in the south, well-fed, fond of his mother, and not yet married because he is, by his nature, a careful man. The second was the work of patience. There was a censor in the censorate named Su Ji, a thin, ill-tempered, very honest man who had spent the last 10 years filing reports no one wanted to read. He hated the Wei family. He hated them because his own younger brother had been bypassed for the salt commissioner post in favor of Wei Heng 5 years earlier and had subsequently died of a fever in a posting in the malarial south. Suji did not know who I was. He never would. He received the copies through 3 intermediaries and a courier whose face he never saw. He read them in his small study by lamplight. He did the math. He did the math again. He filed the necessary preliminary petitions the next morning. He did not sleep that night. The third was the work of luck, except I did not believe in luck. I believed in setting tables so that the food was always within reach of the hungry. I needed Wei Bo to commit a specific crime within 20 days. I waited 5 days, and then I helped him. He had a habit, my memory told me. Wei Bo's habits had been gossip in Xie Yuan circles for 3 years, of taking a particular young actress from a particular theater to a particular pleasure boat on a particular night of every month. The young actress did not like Wei Bo. The young actress would have preferred to be elsewhere. I arranged, through Xie Yuan, for the young actress to be elsewhere on the next such night, and for a substitute to take her place. The substitute was a young woman whose elder brother had been a junior officer at a frontier post that had been suddenly transferred to a malarial province 6 months earlier. A transfer arranged, with 3 layers of paperwork in between, by Wei Heng for a favor he owed his minister. The young woman had not loved her brother more than was filial, but she had loved him enough to want a quiet thing to do. She was, as Xie Yuan had assured me, very calm. What happened on the pleasure boat that night, I learned only afterward, in pieces, from 3 separate accounts. Wei Bo had been drunk. He had become angry. He had struck the young woman. The young woman had not struck back. She had instead, at a particular moment, produced a small folded paper from her sleeve and laid it open on the table in front of Wei Bo. The paper was a letter of grievance, signed in 3 places, with 3 names of 3 women in 3 districts who had been beaten by Wei Bo over the last 2 years. One was the maidservant who had died. The young woman had told Wei Bo, very softly, that the letter would be delivered to the censorate in the morning if she did not return home unharmed. Wei Bo had stared at her for a long time. Wei Bo had then, in a sudden and incoherent fury that made no sense even by his own standards, called for the boat's 2 boatmen to take her off and dispose of her. The boatmen had been paid by Xie Yuan 2 days earlier to do exactly nothing on hearing that order, except to row the boat back to the dock and leave it. When Wei Bo realized that even the boatmen would not obey him, he hit them. He hit them with a brass wine pitcher. He killed one. He cracked the skull of the other and pushed him into the river. The other survived. The other crawled back onto the dock. The other was found by a pair of watchmen, dripping and bleeding, who took him to a healer and who took his testimony when he came to in the morning. By noon the next day, Censor Su Ji had Wei Bo's signed confession from his second townhouse. Wei Bo had confessed to the boatman's death willingly enough, because Wei Bo had still been drunk and had still been arrogant and had still believed his brother would extract him. Su Ji did not need the confession to file his petition, but he took it. He took it because he was a careful man, and because he intended to use it. 3 days later the petition came before the emperor. I was not in the hall. I never attended audiences during which my own work was being executed. But I had it from my father, who had been there, that the emperor had been quiet for a long time before he spoke. The emperor had read Su Ji's filings, the ledger copies, the witness statements, the chain of evidence connecting Wei Bo to Wei Hong, the names of 3 sons of the Wei family who had recently acquired wealth out of all proportion to their visible incomes. He had read them slowly. He had then called for the minister of the right. The minister of the right had defended Wei Hong. He had defended him at length, with much dignity, and very badly. He had defended him because he had to, and the defense had collapsed because his books did not hold. The emperor had ordered Wei Heng's recall from the southern salt works. He had ordered Wei Bo's execution within 30 days. He had ordered an investigation of the Ministry of Revenue's salt accounts going back 10 years. At court that evening the second prince, Yan Wei, had stood at his place looking at his shoes. Pei Wuxia had not been there. He was in his own house, 3 li to the east, with 5 sheets of paper spread out on his black lacquered desk, looking at them the way a man looks at a battle map after the battle has been lost. I know this because the maid who carried away his tea afterward was one of Xie Yuan's. He had not touched the tea. He had not eaten his lunch. He had sat in front of those 5 sheets for 2 hours, without moving, and he had said, near the end of the second hour, one word out loud, to no one. The word was who. It was 8 days later that I received a calligraphy invitation from him. It came on plain white paper in a plain black envelope. The hand was excellent, the kind of careful, even hand a man develops if he writes thousands of words a week and intends every reader of them to know that he writes thousands of words a week. The invitation was for tea, the next afternoon, at a small pavilion on the southwest side of the Imperial Park. It was not signed. It did not need to be signed. There was a single character at the bottom right corner, the character for West, written in a way that left a small particular hook on the last stroke. The hook was a personal habit. The hook belonged to Pei Wuxia. I sat for some minutes with the invitation flat on my desk. I had played the salt move blind. I had not signed anything. I had used 3 layers of intermediaries. The clerk Han, he had never met me. Censor Su Ji did not know I existed. Xie Yuan was paid only through a courier service that did not record names. Wei Bo's pleasure boat had been arranged through women who did not know each other. He had still found me. He had not found me through paper. He had found me through pattern. He had taken the salt move, and he had broken it into its component pieces, and he had asked himself what kind of mind had assembled it. He had then drawn up a short list of the men in the capital who had that kind of mind. He had eliminated the ones who would have signed it. He had eliminated the ones who could not have known about the boatman. He had eliminated the ones who had no reason to act against the Wei family. He had come down to a short list of 4 men. He had then begun to watch all 4 of them quietly. He had watched all 4 of them for 6 days. He had eliminated 3 of them. He had arrived at me. He had no proof. He had no chain. He had only a guess. The guess was good enough to send an invitation. The invitation was a question with no question mark on it. I wrote a reply on plain white paper in a hand that I had spent the last week learning to leave slightly more careless than my real one. A hand still too careful for the old Xie Yuan, but not careful enough for the man who had moved Wei Hong. The reply said 1 line, I would be honored. I sent it by a courier who would not say my name. I bathed. I slept. I dreamed for the first time in this new life. I dreamed I was sitting at a chessboard in a room that had no walls, only paper screens that swayed in a wind. Across the board sat a tall, pale man whose face was a blank disk of white silk. The disk had no features. The disk had a slight movement at the place where a mouth would be, as if the man were smiling under the silk. Between us, on the board, the pieces were not pieces but small figures, each painted to look like a person I knew. Lady Su, old Duanyang, Honey, the boatman, Weibo, the crown prince, the fourth prince, the emperor. I picked up the figure of the emperor and I set it down on a square nearer to me. The man across the board lifted a hand. He picked up the figure of Pei Wuxia. There was a figure of Pei Wuxia on the board, which was strange because I had not noticed it before. He set the figure of Pei Wuxia down on a square nearer to himself. I picked up the figure of Pei Wuxia. The man laughed under the silk and let me take it. I woke up. It was 3 hours before dawn. I lit a lamp. I sat at my desk. I drew nothing, wrote nothing, planned nothing. I sat, and I let myself feel something I had not yet allowed myself to feel in this new life. I was looking forward to the tea. The pavilion on the southwest side of the Imperial Park was a small one with 8 pillars and a roof shaped like a folded paper boat. There was a low table in it. There were 2 cushions on either side of the table. There was a brass charcoal brazier with a kettle on it. There was no one in the pavilion when I arrived. He was already there. I knew this because as I came up the gravel path, his voice reached me before his shape did, and the voice said, lightly, "You are not late, Master Xie. I am early. Please. The water is just at the second boil." He was seated on the far cushion when I came in, robes arranged neatly under him, his hands resting palms down on his thighs. He looked up. The face was as Xie Yuan had described, long, pale, with a mouth set softly at the corners and eyes that were almost too clear. He did not stand. He did not bow. He nodded, once, as if to a colleague, and he gestured at the other cushion with an open hand. I sat down. He poured the tea himself. He poured mine before his. He set the cup in front of me, not pushed quite far enough to be a service and not held back quite far enough to be a slight. The proper distance, exactly. He set his own cup in front of himself. He picked it up. He looked at me over its rim. "I should warn you," he said. "I almost did not invite you. I am sorry to hear it. Don't be. The decision was difficult, not unfortunate. I considered the matter for 2 days. I had reached a conclusion that you and I should not yet meet." "What changed?" "Curiosity," he said, "and patience. I have plenty of one. I had to spend the other to come and find out about the first." I lifted my cup. I did not drink from it. I let the heat of it warm my fingers. "I am sorry to have cost you patience. You have not yet cost me any of it that I cannot recover. Drink, please. It is a chemin, 3 weeks from picking. I came by it through a friend in the south. Tell me if you find it pleasant." I drank a sip. It was an extraordinary tea. It tasted of stone and of damp leaves and of something faintly sweet that arrived only at the back of the tongue and stayed there for some time. I let it stay there. I set the cup back down. "It is more than pleasant. I am glad. You are, I am told, not in the habit of being pleased by small things. You have been told several things about me, then. A few, most of them, I think, no longer true." He smiled when he said this. It was a small smile, even and warm. It did not reach his eyes, but it was also not pretending to reach his eyes. It was the kind of smile a man might give a colleague at the end of a long day, after both of them had survived a particular meeting. It was, I realized with some discomfort, very disarming. I let myself smile back. I let mine reach my eyes, because mine was easier. I had been practicing. You may have been misinformed. Possibly. People very often are. About each other, mostly. I try to keep my information to the things that did not require imagination. What did you keep? That you were born in the spring of the year of the wood serpent. That you have an old white horse in your father's stable that he gave you when you were 9, called Liang. That you have not ridden since you were 14, because Liang stopped wanting to run. That you read the spring and autumn annals in your second year of tutoring more than once. That your tutor wrote in his ledger that you were either lazy or hiding something, and that he privately suspected the second. That your tutor died of a sudden fever in your 10th year of life, and his ledger was given to me 4 years ago by a clerk who did not yet know I would value it. I did not let my face change. That is a lot of work, I said. To find a young man who drinks too much. It is a small amount of work for a man who is interesting. I am sorry to have done it to you without your permission. I am not sorry to have done it. Why are you telling me now? He set his cup down. He did not pour himself more. Because I would like you to be honest with me, he said, in a particular way. And I have found it is easier to ask for honesty after one has explained the prices that have already been paid. Will you tell me a thing? Possibly. What? Were you the one who arranged Weibo? I let the question sit between us for a count of breaths. If I said no, he would not believe me, and the no would tell him that I knew the question was important. If I said yes, I would have given him a knife and asked him politely not to use it. If I tried to deflect, I would tell him that I could be deflected, which would be the worst answer of the three. I drank a slow sip of the tea. You are a very direct man, Master Pei. Only when I have permission to be. You have it. I am grateful. I will tell you the truth, I said. I do not know what you mean by arranged. If you mean did I take a brass wine pitcher into a pleasure boat and strike a man, no. If you mean did I sit in my courtyard on a particular evening and decide that I did not like the way Wei Bo had killed a maidservant, and did certain things happen afterward that I had thought about beforehand? Yes. He nodded. He did not look surprised. He did not look angry. He looked, briefly, like a man who had been working a difficult arithmetic problem for some weeks and had finally been handed the answer key, and who allowed himself half a breath of pleasure at the elegance of the solution before he set the answer key aside to verify the work. That is more than I expected you to admit. I have decided, I said, that I would rather be in a particular kind of relationship with you, the kind that is not built on either of us pretending. Then we are agreed on a thing already. Tell me a thing in return. Ask, did you know about the maidservant? Before. He paused. He thought about it. He did not pretend to think. He actually thought. He moved his cup very slightly to the left, exactly the width of one finger. I did, he said. And I had decided to deal with it later. Weibo was useful. The maidservant was already dead. Punishing him at the time would have cost more than it bought. I had filed it under work to be done after the salt commissioner had been promoted to the ministry. Then we differed in the timing. We differed in the timing. He picked up the cup. He took a sip. He set it down. I will be honest with you, Master Xie. I am sorry the maid is dead. I am sorrier that I let the man who killed her stay near me. I will not let him stay near me again. But I will not, you understand, regret most of what I did. I would think less of you if you did. That is generous. It is not. He laughed. It was a short, small laugh. He did not throw his head back. He did not close his eyes. He laughed in the way a man laughs when he has heard a thing that is not particularly funny but is unexpected enough to surprise him, and he allows the surprise out through the throat instead of swallowing it. It was the first sound he had made that I could not have predicted in advance. Master Xie, he said, I would like to make you an offer. An offer? Yes. What? That we work, the two of us, on the same side of a board for the next year. At what? At the succession of the great Yan. I lifted my cup. I let the steam touch my upper lip. I set it back down. You serve the second prince. I serve no one. I work for him. There is a difference. I have worked for him for 4 years. I have been able to do this because I have been able to see how he behaves when there is no one watching him. And he will not be a good emperor. There was no flicker of his face when he said it. It was a flat sentence, delivered the way a man delivers any other observation in a tea pavilion in the late afternoon. The willows on the south side are casting their shadow on the gravel. The kettle is at the second boil. The prince I have spent 4 years lifting onto the throne will not, when it is done, be a good emperor. Then why have you spent 4 years lifting him? Because I had to lift someone. Because among the three, he is the one who would notice my hand on him last. Because lifting him taught me what lifting feels like. He paused. Because I did not yet know whether there was anyone better. And now, he said, I think there might be. You think there might be. I think there might be. Who? He did not answer. He looked at me across the table with his clear pale eyes, and he did not answer, because he did not need to. The fourth prince. He had also come to the fourth prince. He had taken longer than I had. He had needed 4 years, where I had needed 1 audience. But he had come to the same conclusion. The court would tear itself into 3 pieces over the throne, and one of those pieces would be a small, quiet young man with a slight stoop and his hands folded in front of him. I let my face show, for the first time in our meeting, something I had been holding back. I let it show interest. It was easy because the interest was real. Master Pei, I said, why are you telling me any of this? Because I would rather have you across this table than across the city. That is also generous. It is not. I waited. I have been working alone for a long time, he said. I have done this because I prefer it. I find it easier. I find other people, in general, slower than I am. I find that they do not see what I see, and I find that when I try to explain to them what I see, they look at me as if I have lost a marble somewhere on the floor. I have learned, over years, to stop explaining. I have learned to do the work alone, and then to give the work to other men, and to let them think they have done it. I am not complaining. I have been very happy with this arrangement. I am only telling you the truth about why I have been alone. And I have read your salt move twice, and I have not, the second time, been able to improve on it. I have been able to argue with 3 of its choices. I have not been able to do better than them. This is the first such move I have not been able to do better than in 8 years. You are flattering me. I am stating an observation. You are doing both. He smiled. It was the small, even smile again. I am doing both. I will not apologize for it. It is the only currency I have brought to the table that I think you might value. I looked at him for a long moment. I will tell you, looking back, what I felt at that table. I felt, very clearly, that this man was the most dangerous man I had ever sat across from in either of my lives. I also felt, very clearly, that I liked him. The 2 feelings were not in conflict. They were the same feeling. It is a thing I have had to come to terms with, since, that the most dangerous person at a table will often be the one whose company you most enjoy, and that you cannot decide to like them less in order to make them less dangerous to you. You can only decide what to do about it. I picked up my cup. I drank the rest of the tea in one slow swallow. Master Pei, Master Xie, if we work on the same side of a board for a year, what happens at the end of the year? He thought. He thought for a long time. He did not rush the answer. At the end of the year, he said, there will be a new emperor. There will be a court that has been rearranged. There will be a number of dead men, none of them, if we do our work, more than necessary. There will be you, and there will be me. The question of what is to be done with either of us at that point I would prefer, he said, to leave for then. Then you are not offering me a partnership. I am offering you a year of one. And after that, he said, gently, we will see whether it has become something else. You mean we will see whether one of us tries to kill the other? He nodded, with the small, even smile. It may not come to that, but we will see. Master Pei, Master Xie, I would like to accept your offer. I am glad. I would also, I said, like to make a condition. State it. For the duration of this year, you will not move against my family. You will not touch my father. You will not lean on my stepmother. You will not approach my brother. If you have questions about any of them, you will bring them to me. I will answer them, or I will not. You will accept whichever I do. He nodded. For the duration of this year, he said, you will not move against the man closest to me. You will not lean on Chao Yi. You will not approach him. If you have questions about him, you will bring them to me. I will answer them, or I will not. Agreed. Agreed. We did not shake hands. We did not bow to each other. He poured another cup of tea for each of us. We drank it in a silence that was, by then, not awkward. When I rose to leave, he rose too, and he came to the edge of the pavilion with me. And as I was about to step down onto the gravel, he said, almost as an afterthought, "Master Xie." "Yes. You said earlier that you did not yet know what I meant by the word arranged. I remember. I will tell you. In the future, when I use it, I will mean what you meant by it just now." I nodded. "Then we have a common language." "Then we have," he said, "a common language." I stepped down onto the gravel. I walked back along the path. I did not look back. I did not need to. He stood at the edge of the pavilion until I was out of sight, and then he sat back down at the table, and he poured himself one more cup of the Chiman tea, and he drank it slowly. I knew this because Xie Yuan's woman had been watching from a distance with a basket of laundry on her arm. He drank it slowly because he was thinking. So was I? The first thing I did when I got home was sit down at my desk and write 3 sheets of paper. The first sheet was a list of every promise I had made him. The second sheet was a list of every promise he had made me. The third sheet was a list of the things he had told me about himself that he had not had to tell me. The third sheet was the longest. I sat with it for some time. A man like Pei Wuxia did not waste words. A man like Pei Wuxia did not give away pieces of his history to a stranger over tea. He had given me 5. He had told me that he had been working alone for years and found it lonely. He had told me that he had served Yin Wei not from loyalty, but from convenience. He had told me that he was not going to support Yin Wei to the throne. He had told me that he had a person he loved. He had told me, by leaving Yin Ruoshi's name unsaid, that he had an adopted sister whose existence he did not want me to think about. I had heard Yin Ruoshi's name once, in Xie Yuan's first telling. She was, in name, the Pei family's other adopted daughter, 23, kept in Yangzhou under a tutor, never brought up to the capital. She had not been mentioned in Pei Wuxia's invitation. She had not been mentioned in his offer. He had not, on any of the 3 sheets in front of me, included her in his protective demand. He had asked me not to touch Chao Yi. He had not asked me not to touch Yin Ruoshi. That could mean 2 things. Either she meant nothing to him, in which case he would not have mentioned her or kept her hidden, or she meant a great deal to him, in which case he had decided that even mentioning her name to me was too dangerous. I drew a small circle around the second possibility on the 3rd sheet. I would think about her later. I sat back. I rubbed my eyes. I had agreed to spend a year working alongside the man I had been most afraid of in this life. I had not agreed to it because I trusted him. I had agreed to it because I had calculated that I would learn more about him from inside the partnership than from outside it, and because I had calculated that he had calculated the same about me, and because both of us would, at the end of the year, know everything about each other that we needed to know to act. I had also agreed to it because part of me, the part that had been alone for a long time too, had wanted to. I did not write that part down. I will not tell you, beat by beat, the work of the next 4 months. I will tell you that Pei Wuxia and I met every 9 days, in a different small private place each time. I will tell you that we exchanged information, in those meetings, the way 2 surgeons exchange instruments, quickly, precisely, without comment. I will tell you that we did not always agree. I will tell you that when we did not agree, we argued, and that the arguments were the best part of any of those meetings, and that in 3 of them I changed my mind, and that in 2 of them he changed his. I will tell you that we did certain things together. We moved the crown prince, Xie Yuan, closer to his ruin without pushing him in. He pushed himself in. He pushed himself in by attempting, in the 2nd month of our work, a small private treaty with the Khitan to the north, designed to secure their neutrality in any succession dispute. The treaty leaked. Pei Wuxia leaked it. He leaked it in a way that did not point at us. The crown prince's faction tried, for 3 weeks, to recover. They did not. The crown prince was confined to his residence on the emperor's order. He was not yet stripped of his title. He would be, eventually. I did not, then or later, take any pleasure in the man's fall. He had inherited a position he could not have done well in. He had reached for the only kind of support a man in his position could have reached for. He had been undone by a piece of paper he had never seen. We moved certain other men into certain other places. Censor Su Ji was promoted, on the strength of his Wei Hung investigation, to deputy chief censor. He did not know we had pushed his promotion through. He never would. He continued to be excellent at his job, which was now, by our arrangement, near our hand. Minister of the Left Gu Sui regained the influence he had lost in the previous reshuffle. He did not know we had cleared the way for him. He continued to be the careful old man he had always been, which was now, by our arrangement, near our hand. We did not yet move the fourth prince. We agreed, separately, in two different conversations, that the fourth prince was not yet ready to be visible. We agreed that visibility, too soon, would invite the second prince's full attention onto him, and the second prince's full attention was a thing neither of us yet wished to draw down on the man we both intended to set on the throne. I learned, in those months, that Pei Wuxia was funnier than I had expected. I learned this by accident, in a conversation in the second month, in which he made an observation about the Minister of War's habit of pretending not to hear questions he did not wish to answer. The observation involved an extended comparison to a particular kind of carp in a particular kind of pond at a particular monastery he had once visited in the south. The carp, he said, had developed over generations of being fed by monks in absolute conviction that the only sound in the world was the gong that announced their feeding. They had become deaf to all other sounds. They could be picked up out of the water by hand if you stayed silent. He said this with no particular animation, in the same flat, warm voice he used for everything. And I had laughed before I had decided to laugh, and he had looked at me with an expression I could not at first read. The expression, I realized later, was pleasure. He was pleased that I had laughed. That, more than anything, was what I had to watch out for. I learned, in those months, that Pei Wuxia was reluctant to use violence. Not opposed. He had killed several men, indirectly, in his career, including, I came to understand, the previous Minister of War, who had been a particular obstacle 3 years before, but reluctant. He preferred to break men by making them break themselves. He had a particular respect for men who would, given the right pressure, undo their own positions, and he had a particular contempt for men who would, given the wrong pressure, only become harder. He did not like to spend lives. He had spent the maidservant only because he had not been paying attention. He had been paying attention every other time. I learned that I respected him. I learned that I would still, when the year ended, have to decide what to do about him. In the meantime, in those months, 3 other things happened. The first was Su Wanyu. The second was the Princess Yoning. The third was Lin Shuang. Su Wanyu was 20. She was the daughter of General Su Tianho, who had commanded the Western Army for 14 years and who had been recalled, 2 years before my arrival in this body, on charges of having mishandled a critical supply route during a Khitan border incursion. He had been stripped of his rank and confined to a country estate. He had not been executed because the emperor had liked him. He had not been pardoned because the emperor could not, given the charges, pardon him. Su Wanyu had been engaged, before her father's fall, to a son of the Pei family. The engagement had been broken when her father had been disgraced. She had been engaged again, 6 months later, to me. The engagement to me had been arranged by my father, who had owed General Su a debt of friendship from their youth, and who had taken Su Wanyu into our household, not yet married, but no longer marriageable elsewhere, as a way of paying the debt without quite paying it. She lived in a small courtyard in the back of the Xie residence. She had a single maidservant. She did not attend banquets. She did not visit her family. She read constantly. Xie Yuan had not paid her any attention in the year and a half she had been in the house. Xie Yuan had not even, I gathered from his memories, looked at her face. She had been, to him, a piece of furniture in a courtyard he did not visit. I had not visited the courtyard since taking this body. In the 3rd month of my work with Pei Wuxia, I did. I went on a clear morning. I sent no servant ahead. I walked through the residence's 3rd courtyard and into the 4th and around the back where the small plain building was, and I stood at the foot of its short stairs for some seconds before I knocked on the open frame of its open door. The woman inside the room looked up from a low desk. She had a brush in her hand. She had been writing. There was a small stack of pages at her elbow. She was not wearing court silks. She was wearing a plain ash-gray robe with a darker gray sash. Her hair was bound in a single low braid that had been threaded with no ornament at all. Her face was thinner than I would have expected, with sharp dark eyebrows and a wide flat mouth and very steady eyes. She looked at me as a stranger. "Yes," she said. "Lady Su." "Yes. I am Xie Yuan." She lowered the brush. She set it carefully down on its rest. "Yes. I have come, this morning, to apologize to you." She did not stand. She did not bow. She did not invite me in. She did, however, after a count of breaths, slide the stack of papers under a book at the corner of the desk, which was the first piece of useful information she gave me that day. The papers were not work she wanted seen. For what? For having ignored you for a year and a half. She looked at me. She did not say anything. I took a breath. "I will not ask you to forgive me," I said. "I will only ask, today, that you allow me to speak to you for a quarter of an hour. After that I will leave. If you would like me to leave again before the quarter hour is up, you have only to tell me, and I will. Tomorrow, if you would like to speak with me again, you may send for me. If you would not like to speak with me again, I will respect it." She looked at me for another count of breaths. "Sit down," she said. I sat down on the bench across from her low desk. "Why now?" "Because I will be marrying you in 8 months. Because before I marry you, I would like to know who I am marrying. Because before I marry you, I would like to give you the chance to know who you are marrying, so that if you would prefer not to, you may say so to me, and I will arrange for a different conclusion." "You would arrange for a different conclusion?" "Yes. My father is in disgrace, Master Xie. My family has no other prospects. If you do not marry me, no one of any rank will. I will be sent to a temple. Then I would arrange, before sending you to a temple, that your father be restored to his rank." She paused. "You cannot," she said. "I can. I will not, before you ask. I will, before any marriage you do not want." She looked at me for a long time. "You are not the Xie Yuan I had heard about. I am the Xie Yuan who, 8 months ago, came back from a place I do not remember. I have spent most of those 8 months trying to be someone my father might one day not be ashamed of. I have made progress. I have not yet succeeded. I have, in the process, found that several of the things in my life are not what I had thought them to be. You are one of them. I should have come to you 6 months ago. I am sorry." She did not say anything for some time. She did then a thing I had not expected. She rose from her low desk. She crossed the small room. She sat down on the bench beside me, not next to me, but at the other end, with the space of 2.5 feet between us. She folded her hands in her lap. "What do you want to know?" "Whatever you would like to tell me." She told me. We sat on that bench for 2.5 hours. I had said a quarter of an hour. I had been wrong. She told me about her father. She told me about the supply route incident. She had been 12 at the time, but she had been her father's only child, and her father had told her things he had not told anyone else. The incident had been engineered by an officer in her father's command, a man named Zhou Yin, who had been promoted to a senior post in the Ministry of War 6 months after her father's fall. She told me about her mother, who had died in the 3rd year of her father's posting at the western border. She told me about the year and a half in our compound. She told me about Xie Lang, my half-brother, who had been kind to her, who had sent a maid with a tray of pears every season, even though his own mother disapproved. I had not known this about Xie Lang. I noted it. I told her then, in turn, certain things. Not everything. I told her my engagement to her was good for both of us if she wished it to be, and that I would, regardless, work on her father's restoration. I told her I had begun to be involved in the court, in ways I could not yet describe to her in detail, but that some of what I did would touch on her father's case. I told her I would not, in any case, ask her to be anything other than what she was. I told her that what she was already, on this first morning, was more than I had expected to find. She did not blush at any of this. She had a small, very direct way of looking at me, and she only looked at me with it. At the end of the 2.5 hours, she said, "I will think on this. Take what time you wish. I will think on this for 1 month. 1 month. At the end of the month, I will give you an answer." I rose. I bowed properly to her. She rose. She did not bow. She looked at me as I straightened up. She said, "Master Xie." "Yes. Whatever your answer is, do not lie to me. I would rather be widowed than lied to. I have not lied to you in this room." "I know." I left. A month later, on the morning after the second new moon, a maid from her small courtyard delivered to my study a single line on a folded slip of paper. The line said, "Yes. Begin with my father." I began with her father. It took 6 weeks. The work involved Xie Yuan, the officer who had engineered the supply route disaster and been promoted afterward, and a senior officer in the Ministry of War who had been a junior of General Su's in the old days and who had never forgiven the new minister for replacing his old friend. We worked the case from 3 sides. Pei Wuxia did not know. I told him about it only after it was done. He read my account and looked at me for a long moment and said, quietly, "You did this for her." "Yes." "You did this because you wanted to, not because you needed to." "Yes." "That is the first thing you have done in our work that I would not have done myself." "I know." He did not say anything for some time. He moved his cup very slightly to the left. He said, "Will you do other things like it?" "Yes." "Will you tell me when you do?" "Sometimes. Not always." "I would like to be told always." "I know." We left it at that. He did not press. I think, now, that he understood I had crossed a small line in our agreement that he was not yet ready to cross with me. I think, now, that he knew it was a line he would, eventually, be glad I had crossed. He did not say so. Su Wanyu's father was restored to his rank in the 7th month of the year. The emperor did not pardon him outright, but conferred upon him a quiet honorary position in the imperial archives. It was not the Western Army. It was honor. Her father came to the capital to thank the emperor. He came afterward to our compound. He bowed to me on the front steps of the courtyard. I refused the bow. I told him I had only done what the truth required. He looked at me. He looked at his daughter. He cried, very briefly and very privately, in a side room. He did not let me see him do it. His daughter did. She told me about it that night. She and I were married a month later in a small ceremony, because neither of us wanted a large one. My father attended. Lady Su attended. Xie Lang attended and stood at the back of the room with the look of a young man who has been thinking, quietly, about something for some time. Pei Wuxia sent a gift. The gift was a sealed jar of Chimen tea, 3 weeks from picking, with a small handwritten note. The note said, "Tea is best shared." Other things, too. Su Wanyu read the note. She looked at me. "You do not have to tell me yet who he is," she said. "I will tell you tonight." I did. She listened. She did not interrupt. At the end, she said only one thing. "Tell me when he begins to be dangerous." "He has always been dangerous." "Then tell me when he begins to be dangerous in a way you cannot manage." "You will know," I said, "before I do." She nodded. Princess Yongning was the youngest daughter of the emperor. She was 19. Her mother had been a beauty from a small kingdom on the western edge of the Yin border, brought to court as part of a treaty arrangement when she was 16, dead of childbed fever a month after Yongning was born. The court whispered about her mother. The court whispered about her too. Her mother's people had, in their family histories, a thin strand of what the locals called foxblood, a small old bloodline of beauty and unease, the kind that did not give a woman supernatural powers, only sometimes a particular sensitivity to certain things. Whether the bloodline was real, whether it gave anything at all, was a thing scholars had argued about for a long time and would continue to argue about. What was true, what I came to know to be true, was that Princess Yongning was, sometimes, able to tell when someone in a room with her was lying to her face. Not always, not at will, not even most of the time, but sometimes, in a way she did not enjoy, she would simply know. She had been kept out of court for most of her life because of this. She was known to the emperor as his odd small daughter. She had a small palace in the southwest quarter of the imperial grounds, an attendant who had been with her since infancy, and almost no friends. Pei Wuxia had attempted, in the second month of our work, to approach her. He had sent her a gift, a beautifully bound copy of a poetry collection from the Southern Lakes, with a single inscription on the inside cover written in his careful, even hand. He had not signed it. She had returned the gift. She had returned it with a single line written under his inscription, in a hand that was less careful but more interesting than his. The line said, "I do not read books I have not chosen myself." He had told me about it, dryly, in the third month. He had said, with a small flat amusement, that he had been rebuffed cleanly enough that he had not yet decided whether to try again. I had said, "Don't." He had looked at me. "Why?" "Because I think she does not like to be approached. She likes to approach. Let her. And how will she know to approach? You will write nothing more. I will write nothing. We will let her hear about us at distance for a while, and we will see what she does. Both of us at distance. Both of us." He had thought about that. He had nodded. Agreed. We had not approached her again. We had let our work in the court be visible enough that a careful observer would notice that a small alliance had formed between an old Marquis heir and a young deputy of the Bureau of Court Records, an alliance whose effects were already beginning to show in certain promotions and certain disgraces. In the 5th month, a sealed note arrived at my house. The note was on rough rice paper. The seal was a small painted fox in red ink. The note said, "I would like to see you. Bring no man with you. Tonight, at the hour of the dog, the southwest gate of the Imperial Park, the small gate, not the large one." I went. I went alone. I went in plain dark blue. I went with a small thin knife in my sleeve and no other weapon. I went on foot. The gate was open. The small old guard at the gate did not look at me. He had been told not to. I walked through the southwest quarter of the Imperial Park, between the willows and the stone lanterns, and I found the small palace I had been told to look for, a low building of dark wood with paper screens at the windows and only one lit lantern at the door. A young woman opened the door before I knocked. She was thin. She was not particularly tall. She had her mother's hair, which my memory provided was a black, so deep it threw red lights when a lamp caught it. She had her father's eyes, dark and slightly tired. She had nothing in her hands. She wore plain white silk. "You came alone," she said. "Yes." He did not come. I did not tell him. Good. She stepped aside. I went in. The room was small and warm. There was a low table. There were 2 cushions. There was a brass charcoal brazier with a kettle on it. There was no servant present. She closed the door behind me. She sat at her own cushion. I sat at mine. She did not pour tea. "Master Xie." "Princess, I will tell you 4 things. Then you will tell me whether I should help you." "I am listening." She held up one finger. "You arrange Weibo?" "I know because I asked a particular woman in the Hall of Mountain and Water a question, and she did not give me the answer with her mouth, but she did with her face, and I learned to read faces before I learned to read poems." She held up a second finger. "You arranged the Salt Commissioner's recall. I know this because I have read every petition Su Ji has filed in the last 4 years, and the ones from this last year are subtly better than the ones from before, in a way that suggests his materials are no longer entirely his own." She held up a third finger. "You are working with Pei Wuxia. I know this because he stopped writing to me in the 3rd month, and you stopped writing past my walls at certain regular hours in the 3rd month, and only 2 men in this city could have decided to stop doing those particular things at the same time without speaking to each other." She held up a 4th finger. You are going to put my fourth brother on the throne. I waited a count of 3. Yes, I said. She lowered her hand. Then I will help you. Conditionally. State the condition. My fourth brother is not to be told that he is being put on the throne. I had not expected that. Princess. My fourth brother is a good man, Master Xie. He is a careful, quiet, decent man. He has no taste for the throne. He does not want it. He has spent his life not wanting it. If you tell him that he is going to have it, he will refuse, and his refusal will be sincere, and his refusal will fail, because you and Master Pei will arrange it that he has it whether he refuses or not. I have lived in this palace for 19 years. I have watched my brothers become themselves. I do not want my fourth brother to spend the rest of his reign feeling that he is a man who took something he did not want and could not refuse. I want him to spend it feeling that he is a man to whom something was given and who chose to bear it. That is a different thing entirely. So you will not tell him. I thought. That is a difficult condition. I know. He will figure it out. Then he will figure it out on his own, in his own time, and he will figure it out in a way he can bear. I thought longer. Princess. Yes. I accept your condition. Pei Wuxia will also accept it. I will tell him. You will tell him I said it. Yes. I would like to meet him sometime. I will arrange it. Not yet. Not yet. She poured the tea then. She poured mine first. She set my cup at exactly the proper distance. She picked up her own cup. She looked at me over its rim. Master Xie. Yes. Do not lie to me about my brother. I will not. She drank. I drank. We sat in silence for some minutes. When I rose to leave, she rose with me. She walked me to the door. She did not say goodbye. She closed the door behind me. I walked back to the small gate. The small old guard did not look at me. I walked home in the dark. I told Pei Wuxia the next time we met. He listened. He thought. He said, in the small, flat, warm voice. She is going to be, he said, a problem. Yes. In an interesting way. Yes. I am glad she will be ours. She will not be ours. She will be his. He paused. That is also true. We changed our plans. We changed several other plans afterward, as the Princess Yongning's small, clean preferences turned out to align very strangely well with the things that worked. Lin Shuang was 19. She was a junior physician at the Imperial Medical Bureau. She had been the third daughter of a small mountain family of healers. She had passed the medical examinations the year before. She was very quiet. She was, my memory and Mu Qingluan's network together informed me, the personal physician's apprentice to one of the consorts. She was also the personal physician's apprentice to no one official, and could be borrowed for small jobs by any senior physician in the bureau, and was therefore present in a great many rooms in a great many of the palaces of the imperial grounds. I did not approach her. She approached me, in the 7th month, by sending a sealed note to my house. The note was on plain rice paper. The seal was a small green leaf. The note said one line, "The Emperor is being poisoned. Slowly. Come tonight." I went. We met in a side room at the Imperial Archives. She was thin. She had clear pale skin and very sharp eyes. She had her hair bound up under a plain physician's cap. She wore the gray robe of her bureau. She came directly to the point. "His Majesty," she said, "is being given a slow tincture in his evening tea. Not every night. 3 nights a week. It is dosed in a way that mimics natural decline. The taster will not notice it because it is not present in lethal amounts. It is only present in amounts sufficient to make a 63-year-old man's heart and kidneys give up 6 months sooner than they otherwise would." How do you know? I know because 4 months ago I was asked to assist the Bureau in compounding what I was told was a heart-strengthening preparation for a senior eunuch. I helped to compound it. I noted the ingredients. The ingredients are not those of a heart-strengthening preparation. They are those of a slow tincture. I made my note. I waited. Why are you telling me? Because the Bureau is divided. Because the senior eunuch I compounded the preparation for died 6 weeks ago of a sudden seizure. Because the same compound has been prepared 7 more times since, by two of the same physicians, and is now being delivered, I have established, to the emperor's evening kitchen, by way of a particular under-eunuch who serves the second prince's mother. And you have established this. I have established it. I will not tell you how. I will say only that I have, on 3 separate evenings this month, been able to substitute the prepared tincture with a harmless substitute of my own making. The emperor has not been poisoned 3 times in the last month who would otherwise have been. I cannot keep doing this indefinitely. The substitution will be noticed. Why are you telling me this and not the chief physician? Because the chief physician is one of the 2 preparing it. I was silent for some seconds. Why are you telling me? I said again. Why me? Because I have a younger brother who is an apprentice cook in the kitchen of the Marquis of Xie Yuan. He has worked there for 3 years. He told me, 2 months ago, that the Marquis's heir had recently begun visiting the kitchen at irregular hours, asking by name after staff who had been there for many years, and treating them like persons whose names he was glad to have learned. He told me that this was, in his recollection, unusual. He asked me whether I thought it meant anything. What did you tell him? I told him I would think about it. I have thought about it. I have come. I looked at her. Lin Shuang. Yes. What do you want? She paused. I want, she said, slowly, the emperor to live until the spring. That is all. That is all. You do not want money. No. You do not want a posting. No. You do not want me to do anything else. I want the emperor to live until the spring, Master Xie. That is all I have come for. After the spring, I do not care what happens in any of these palaces. I have lived in these palaces for 2 years. They are not worth caring about. The emperor, however, is a man. He is a tired old man who has tried to do this job with what he has, and he does not deserve to be poisoned by his own son. I would like him to die in his own bed, in his own time, of his own slow age. I was quiet for a long count of breaths. You will not be safe doing this work alone any longer. I know. You will come to my household, as my wife's personal physician, beginning tomorrow. I cannot leave the bureau. You will not leave the bureau. You will retain your post. You will, additionally, visit my wife's courtyard 3 times a week. You will use the visits as cover. I will arrange the rest. She thought. Why your wife's courtyard? Because my wife has a sharp eye and a careful mouth, and because if you are visiting her you will be invisible to my stepmother, who pays attention to my own visitors more than to my wife's. Then yes. Then yes. She rose. She bowed. She left. I sat in the small archives room for some minutes. Then I rose, and I went home, and I sat at my desk in the dark, and I wrote one more sheet of paper. The sheet said, the emperor will live until spring. The second prince's mother will fall before winter. I did not yet know how. I did not yet need to. I had 4 months. Half a stone, several birds. I told Pei Wuxia about the poisoning at our next meeting. I did not tell him about Lin Shuang. I told him I had a source in the Imperial Medical Bureau. I told him the source had identified that the emperor was being slowly tinctured. I told him the chain of preparation traced back through a particular under-eunuch in service to the second prince's mother, Consort 1. I told him I intended to break Consort 1 by winter without using the poisoning directly, because the poisoning, if used directly, would burn too many people who were merely tools. He listened. He was quiet for a long time. He set his cup on its rest very carefully. He did not move it to the left or to the right. He looked at me over it. Yen Wei did not order it, he said. It was not a question. I know. His mother did. I know. He did not know. I know. You do not need to be gentle about it. I am not being gentle. I am being accurate. I have known for 2 months that Yen Wei is not the architect of the worst things his faction does. His mother is. She has been protecting him from the consequences of his own arrogance by removing the obstacles in his path before he encounters them. The emperor is the largest obstacle. She has been removing him. Yen Wei would not have arranged the emperor's death. He is not yet ready, in his own mind, to be without his father. He has not yet imagined the moment of putting on the crown. His mother has imagined it for him many times. She has decided he is ready when she is. Pei Wuxia nodded. You have been thinking about this for some weeks. What is the plan? Consort Wen has a younger sister who married a junior commander in the Western armies. The junior commander, 2 years ago, sold information about a yin supply route to a chitin agent in exchange for silver. The information cost a small infantry unit 38 men. The case was buried then because Consort Wen used her sons to bury it. The bodies of the 38 have not been buried because Consort Wen used her sons to lose the records of their location. The censorate, in the course of the SALT investigation, will incidentally come across one of the buried documents in a particular file in a particular bureau because I will arrange it. Suji will follow it. Suji will find the junior commander. The junior commander, when found and confronted, will be offered the opportunity to die quietly in his cell of grief or noisily on the executioner's block. He will choose quietly. Before he chooses quietly, he will name, in his last testament, every favor he has received from Consort Wen's family in exchange for his service. The testament will be sealed. The testament will be delivered to the emperor, unsealed by the emperor himself in the presence of 3 witnesses, none of whom are connected to either of our factions. The emperor will then have a choice. He may publicly disgrace Consort Wen and her son. He may privately exile them. He may do something else entirely. I think he will choose to privately exile them, because public disgrace will harm the Yin family's standing in a year when his health is failing. I think, regardless of what he chooses, Consort Wen will be moved out of the palaces by the new year. I think Yin Wei, deprived of her, will lose 1/3 of his teeth. Pei Wuxia listened to all of this without moving. When I finished, he poured himself another cup of tea. He poured mine. He set them down. Do you understand what you have just told me? Yes. You have just told me, he said, that you will break my prince by next winter. Yes. Without using the poisoning directly. Without exposing your source. Without exposing yourself. Through a route that touches him only through his mother and through a junior officer he does not personally know. Yes. And you have told me, also, that the only reason you are telling me is courtesy. That is correct. He looked at me for a long count of breaths. You do not need my permission for any of this. I do not. You are not asking for it. I am not. You are asking me to step aside in time. I am asking you to be ready, in time, for what comes after. What comes after? The 4th prince. The court. The succession. You and I will need to have done a great deal of work in the last 6 weeks of the year if we want the new emperor to inherit a court he can sit on without being thrown. He nodded slowly. All right. I waited. I have a question, he said. Ask. How long have you been planning this? Since the cold pool banquet. The shape of it. The details since I learned about the tincture. That is 6 months. Approximately. In 6 months you have arranged the disgrace of a salt commissioner, the recall of a chitin corresponding crown prince, the restoration of a disgraced general, your own marriage to that general's daughter, the cultivation of a princess we previously could not touch, the placement of a physician inside your own household, and the planning of the fall of a consort. You have done these things while maintaining the public appearance of a young man whose chief interest is wine. Yes. You are going to be, he said, a very difficult man to be on the wrong side of. I know. I am glad to be on the right side of you then. For another 6 months. He smiled. It was the small, even smile. It was not, this time, controlled. It reached his eyes for half a breath before he tucked it away. For another 6 months, he said, yes. We sat across from each other in that small private place. 2 strategists in their 2nd year of work who had just told each other, without ever quite saying so, that the duel between us would resume the day the new emperor sat down. He was not afraid. I was not afraid. We were, in that hour, 2 men in a tea pavilion enjoying each other's company in the last steady light before a great deal of weather. He raised his cup. I raised mine. We did not toast. We did not need to. We drank. Consort Wen fell in the 11th month, exactly as I had described. The junior commander confessed. He named his patron. He died quietly. His testament was unsealed by the emperor in the presence of the chief censor, the chief minister of personnel, and the senior eunuch of the inner palace. The senior eunuch, who had been on Consort Wen's payroll for 2 decades, said nothing on hearing the testament read aloud. He said nothing because his hands were shaking too hard to hold his brush, and because he had calculated, in the few seconds between the 3rd sentence and the 7th, that his own position was about to be saved or ended depending on the emperor's next words. The emperor sat in his chair for a long time. The emperor was 63. He had outlived 3 empresses. He was a tired old soldier who had been ruling a court of clerks for too long. He had, in the last 6 weeks, slept better and breathed easier than at any time in the last year, because the tincture that had been slowly killing him had been replaced by an inert substitute by a junior physician he had never met, and his old soldier's body, given a chance to rest, had taken it. He looked at the senior eunuch. He said only one sentence. "Bring me my 2nd son's mother." Consort Wen was brought. She walked into the audience chamber on her own feet. She walked out of the audience chamber an hour later on her own feet. She was given 2 days to leave Bianjing. She was moved to a country estate in the south. She did not return to the capital. She did not die. She was permitted to write to her son once a month. The 2nd prince was not exiled. The 2nd prince was reduced. His staff was halved. His allowance was halved. His public functions were ended. He was told, in a phrase the senior eunuch carried to him the next morning, that the consideration of his suitability for the throne was, for the moment, suspended. He sat in his residence for 3 days. On the 4th day, he sent for Pei Wuxia. Pei Wuxia went. He stayed for an hour. He came out of the residence with his face arranged exactly the way it had been arranged when he had entered. He went home. He sat at his black lacquer desk for some hours. He wrote me a note. The note said, "He has released me from his service. He has done it gracefully. He has asked me to wish him well in private. I have wished him well in private. The duel between you and me, Master Xie, has begun." I read the note in my own study. I burned it in the brazier. I sat for some minutes in front of the brazier, watching the last ember go. Then I went to find my wife. Su Wanyu was in her courtyard. She was reading. She set down her book when I came in. "It has begun," I said. "I know. I can see it on your face." I sat down beside her on the bench. She did not move. She did not lean against me. She had not become a leaning woman in our 7 months of marriage. She had become other things. "Tell me what you need," she said. "I do not yet know. Tell me when you know." "I will. Tell me what he will do first." "He will not move quickly. He has lost his prince. He will need a new peace. He has, I think, the 4th prince in mind. He will try to reach him. Will you let him?" "No." "How?" "I do not yet know." She nodded. She was quiet for some seconds. "My lord." She had begun calling me my lord in the 3rd month of our marriage, in private, in a tone that no one else in the household would have recognized as anything other than ordinary respect. I knew otherwise. The tone meant several things, but always it meant pay attention. "Yes. Yoning came to see me this afternoon." I turned. She did. She did. She came on foot. She came alone. She came in plain clothes. She came in by the side gate. She told me that she would like to speak to you tomorrow at the hour of the dog at the small gate again. Did she say why? No. She said only one thing else. What? She said you should not go alone this time. I sat for a count of breaths. All right. I will go with you. I looked at her. My lady, my lord, it is not safe. It is not safer for you to go alone. I will go with you. I will go armed. You are not trained. I have trained, for the last 7 months, with the master my husband trains with. I have not told my husband. My husband, in his 8 months of late evenings and his careful arrangements, has not noticed that the master sometimes goes to the 3rd courtyard at the hour of the rat, and that I am there. I am not a swordsman. I can hold a knife. I will be there because if Yongning says you should not go alone, you should not go alone, and the only person in this household I trust to go with you is me." I looked at her for some seconds. "I am sorry," I said, "that I did not notice." "You should be." "I am." "Then we will go together." "Yes." I rose. I bowed properly to her. She rose. She bowed properly to me. She did not smile. She had not, in the 7 months of our marriage, smiled often. She smiled only at the things that were funny. The bowing was not. We went together the next night. The princess opened the door before we knocked. She looked at Xie Yuan. She did not look surprised. She nodded, once, as if a guess she had been carrying had been confirmed. "Lady Xie." "Princess." "Come in. Both of you." We came in. The room was the same. Low table, 2 cushions, brass brazier, kettle. There was a 3rd cushion tonight. There was a 3rd teacup. She had been expecting 2 of us. We sat. She did not pour. She looked at me. "He has been to see the 4th prince." "When?" "3 nights ago." He went on foot. He went through the Southwest Park, by way of the Willow Path. He sat with my brother for an hour. He brought tea. He brought no other gift. He spoke for the entirety of the hour, and my brother listened. When he left, my brother sat by the window for a long time, and then he sent for me. I came. He asked me whether I would speak with him. I said yes. He asked me one question. She paused. "What did he ask?" I said. "He asked," she said, "whether I had been arranging anything in the last year that he ought to know about." I drew a long, slow breath. "What did you say?" I said I had not been arranging. I said other people had been arranging. He asked whether I had assisted those other people. I said I had, in small ways. He asked whether the other people had ever asked me to lie to him. I said they had not. They had asked me only not to tell him, which was a different thing. He sat for a long time. He asked me whether I thought the other people were good people. I said I thought they were not, in the way ordinary people meant the word good, but that they were trustworthy in the way that mattered to a man whose throne was being arranged for him. He took that well. He took it badly. He did not show it. He took it badly. He has been raised, Master Xie, to dislike being arranged. He has been raised to dislike it more than anything else in the world. He has spent his life arranging himself, very small, around the edges of his more visible brothers, in order to be left alone, and he has been left alone, and he has come to be very fond of being left alone. He is angry at me. He is angry at you. He is angry at Master Pei. He is, I think, a little angry at himself for not noticing earlier. I sat with this. Xie Yuan, you sat with this. What does he want to do? Xie Yuan, you said. The princess looked at her. He does not yet know, she said. He has not yet decided. He told me one thing else. He told me that he wished to meet, this week, with both of the men who had been arranging him. Both. Master Xie and Master Pei. He knows about Master Pei. He knows that Master Pei came to him 3 nights ago and tried to recruit him to a faction Master Pei had not previously appeared to belong to. He knows about you because Master Pei told him about you. Master Pei told him a great deal. I was quiet. Princess. Yes. What did Master Pei say to your brother? She looked at me. He said, she said, that he and you had been working together, that the work had been good, that the work was no longer necessary, because the obstacle the work had been intended to remove was now removed, that he, Master Pei, was prepared, in the new circumstances, to offer my brother his full service, that you, Master Xie, were a more complicated proposition, which my brother should consider for himself. I was very still. He has begun his move. He has begun his move. He has begun it with the prince. He has begun it with the prince. That is brave. It is a kind of bravery. I looked at Xie Yuan. He has gone first, she said. He has gone to the only piece on this board that we cannot move ourselves. He has. He is buying time. He is making the prince the question, and the question buys him time. He is. I looked at the princess. Princess. Yes. You said your brother wished to meet both of us. This week. Yes. Will it be a single meeting or 2 separate meetings? He has not yet decided. He asked me to ask you. I thought. Tell him a single meeting, I said. Both of us together. Tell him to choose the day. Tell him to choose the place. Tell him to choose the witnesses. You are confident. I am ready. She nodded. She lifted the kettle, then. She poured 3 cups of tea. She poured Xie Yuan's first. We drank in silence for some minutes. When we rose to leave, the princess walked us to the door. Master Xie. Yes. I am sorry I asked you to keep my brother in the dark. You were right to ask. He has found out anyway. He was always going to. I know. I should have known how he would feel about it. You did. You only hoped you were wrong. She did not answer. She closed the door behind us. Xie Yuan walked beside me through the dark park. We did not speak until we were back at the small gate. My lord. Yes. Pei Wuxia has done a thing I would not have predicted. He has. What does it mean? It means, I said, that the year is 6 weeks early. The single meeting was held in the 4th prince's residence, in the eastern study, at the hour of the goat, on the 3rd day of the 12th month. The 4th prince had chosen the day, the place, and the witnesses. The witnesses were 2, his old tutor, a small white-bearded scholar named Master Gao who had taught him from his 8th year, and his sister, the Princess Yongning. There was no servant in the room. There was no guard at the inner door. The outer door was guarded by 2 of the prince's own men, who were old enough to know how to forget anything they heard. I came in plain dark gray. Pei Wuxia came in plain dark gray. We did not greet each other in the antechamber. We did not need to. We came into the study together. We bowed to the 4th prince. We bowed to Princess Yongning. We bowed to Master Gao. The prince was seated behind a low desk. He had a book open in front of him. He closed it when we came in. He set it aside. He gestured. We sat on the cushions arranged for us. He looked at us. He was small and slightly stooped and 22 years old. He had dark eyes set in a thin, pale face. He had ink on his right thumb. He was wearing the plain dark blue of a working scholar. Even though this was his own residence, even though he could have been wearing anything, he looked at us the way a man looks at 2 people who have been moving the furniture in his house without his permission. He did not raise his voice. Master Xie, Master Pei, Your Highness, I have been told, he said, that the 2 of you have been moving the furniture in my house. We did not interrupt. I have been told, he said, by my sister, by my old teacher, and by Master Pei himself, that the moving has been done well. I have inspected several of the moved pieces. I will not say I approve of them. I will say that they are not, as a rule, where they used to be, and the new places are, in most cases, more useful. He paused. He looked at me. Master Xie, Your Highness, you have arranged a great many things in the last year. Yes. None of them with my consent. None of them, Your Highness, required your consent. That is not, by itself, a justification. I know. Why did you not come to me? I drew a slow breath. Your Highness. Yes. I will tell you the truth. I had 3 reasons. First, I did not know you. I did not know whether you wished to be involved. Second, I knew, from your sister, that you had spent your life not wishing to be involved, and that I would risk losing you entirely if I came to you too early. Third, I had not yet earned the right to ask you for anything. A man who comes to a prince of the great Yin with no service rendered, only a plan to render service in future, is a man asking the prince to risk a great deal on his word. I did not wish to be that man until I had something to show. I have, now, something to show. He looked at me for a long count of breaths. He turned to Pei Wuxia. Master Pei, you had been serving my second brother. Yes. And you came to me 3 nights ago to offer your service. Yes. Why? Because, Your Highness, I no longer serve your brother, and because I would, if you would have me, serve you. Why? Because you are the better choice. That is not an answer. Pei Wuxia paused. He did not pause to think. He paused because he was deciding how much truth to tell. I knew this because I had begun to know him. He gave a great deal of truth. Your Highness, I served your second brother for 4 years. I served him because he was the prince in front of me, and because his arrangement allowed me to do the kind of work I find satisfying, and because I had decided, when I was younger, that I would be happier if I became the man who arranged a throne than if I became the man who sat on it. I have not yet had reason to revise that decision. Over the last year, I have come to understand that your second brother would not, in fact, be a good emperor. I have done his work anyway. I have done his work because I had not yet seen a better option. I have, this last year, come to see one. I have come to see that you are a man who would not enjoy being an emperor and might, for that exact reason, be a better one than any of your brothers. He paused. I am not flattering you, Your Highness. I am telling you what I observed. The fact that I am telling you what I observed in a way that is also useful to me does not make it false. The fourth prince looked at him for a long time. Master Pei. Yes. You have a particular gift, I am told, for sentences that are true and also useful. Yes. It is a difficult gift. It is. It is the kind of gift that allows a man to forget, after some years, which of his sentences are simply true. Yes. You have not forgotten yet. I have not. How would I know? Pei Wuxia did a thing that I had not seen him do at any of our meetings, in any of our small private rooms, over a year of work. He looked, briefly, away. He looked away because the question had hit him in a place he had not prepared a defense for. He looked away because the question had been a good question, and he was a man who, when struck by a good question, allowed himself, for one breath, to acknowledge it. He looked back. Your Highness, he said, you would not. You would only, eventually, see whether I had forgotten or not. You would see it by the way I behaved. I am not asking for your trust on the basis of my word. I am asking for the chance to behave in front of you for some years, and then for you to decide. The fourth prince did not answer right away. He turned to me. Master Xie. Yes. Will you, also, behave in front of me for some years? Yes. And you will tell me, sometimes, when you have arranged a thing. Yes. Sometimes. Not always. I will not lie to you about the not always. There are things I will not tell you because telling you them would harm you. There are things I will tell you because not telling you them would harm you more. I will not always be able to tell you which is which until afterward. I will be sorry, sometimes, for the choices I have made. I will not, however, lie to you when you ask. That is what my sister said you would say. Your sister knows me. Yes. He sat for a long time. He looked at Master Gao. The old white-bearded scholar had said nothing through the entire meeting. He had not even, that I had seen, moved. He looked at the prince now. He did not nod. He did not shake his head. He gave only one very slight pursing of his lips, the kind of small expression that a tutor of 40 years gives to a student of 15 years when the student is choosing between two answers on an examination and the tutor knows the answer the student will choose. The fourth prince looked back at us. All right. We waited. I will accept your service, he said, both of you, with conditions. State them, Your Highness. I will be told, in advance, of any work that involves the death of a person. I may forbid the work. If I forbid it, you will not do it. If I do not forbid it, the work is mine, not yours. We bowed. I will be told, in advance, of any work that touches my brothers. The crown prince is not yet finished. The second prince is not yet finished. They are both my brothers. I have not loved them well in our lives. I would prefer not to lose them by my own hand. We bowed. I will be told, after the fact, of any work that has been done already. There will be no more work done in my name that I have not been told of, in some form, at some time. We bowed. Master Pei. Yes. You will move into my residence as senior tutor in 2 weeks. The post is open. I will sign the papers tomorrow. I am honored, Your Highness. You will not be honored. You will be busy. Yes. Master Xie. Yes. You will not move into my residence. No. You will, however, Be the senior person in the city to whom my senior tutor reports. Yes. Not officially. No. Officially, you are my fourth cousin's husband's brother's clerk on every paper that crosses my desk regarding the Marquis. Yes. Practically, you are the only voice he listens to except his own. He listens to two voices, Your Highness. His own, and his man Chow Yi. The prince paused. Yes, he said. All right. The two of them. And you. Yes. Now. He picked up his book again. He opened it to where he had been. You will go, he said, and you will not come back tonight. You will return individually, in 2 days, at the hours my sister will set. You will not return together. I have allowed myself one evening of having the two of you in the same room. I will not allow myself a second. I have a great deal of reading to do. We bowed. We rose. We left. In the corridor outside the residence, Pei Wuxia and I walked side by side until we reached the outer gate. Master Xie. Yes. You did not interrupt me. You did not need interrupting. You did not correct me. You did not need correcting. You were not concerned that I would say a thing he would prefer to hear from you. I was not. That is more trust than I had earned by the start of this evening. It was earned by the end. He laughed. It was the small, short laugh I had heard for the first time at the tea pavilion. The willows on the path outside the prince's residence were bare and dark in the winter air. The lanterns hanging from them gave very little light. He did not throw his head back. He laughed, briefly, and then he stopped laughing, and he looked at me sideways. Master Xie. Yes. We are not going to be on opposite sides next year. No. No. I have decided. I do not wish to spend the next year of my life trying to outmaneuver you. I am tired. You have decided this in the last hour. I have. It is not a thing you can decide alone. I know. That is why I am telling you. I am asking you to decide it too. I walked a few steps in silence. Master Pei. Yes. You are aware that if I agree, and you change your mind in 6 months, I am at a tremendous disadvantage. I am aware. You are also aware that if you agree, and I change my mind in 6 months, you are at a tremendous disadvantage. I am. Then we are, both of us, very tired. Yes. I walked a few more steps. All right, I said. He nodded. We came to the outer gate. The guards opened it for us. He went left along the dark street, toward his own residence. I went right. We did not look back. In a small lit room 3 streets away, Chow Yi was waiting for him with a hot pot of soup and a hand he would set briefly on the back of Pei Wuxia's neck when Pei Wuxia came in. The way Chow Yi had been setting his hand on the back of Pei Wuxia's neck at the end of long evenings for 6 years. In a small lit room in my own household, Xie Yuan was waiting for me with 2 teacups and a question she would ask me, gently, about what kind of evening had it been. We had both been very tired that winter. Things, after that, moved fast. The emperor named the 4th prince, Bianjing, crown prince at the first audience of the new year. The naming was not a surprise to anyone in the inner circle. It was a surprise to most of the court. The crown prince Xie Yuan had been demoted 3 weeks earlier, in a quiet ceremony, on the grounds of his chitin correspondence. He was permitted to retain his stipend and his residence, but stripped of his rank and his army post. The 2nd prince, Yin Wei, was no longer being considered. The 6th prince, Yin Min, was 9 years old, which left him out by his own age. There had been, in the weeks between Yin Yuan's demotion and the new year, considerable maneuvering in certain circles around the question of whether any of the other princes, the 3rd, who was a poet and lived in the south, the 5th, who was 12, the 7th, who was sickly, might be brought forward. Pei Wuxia and I had spent some of those weeks ensuring that those circles came to nothing. Bianjing took the naming with the calm of a man who had been preparing for it for 2 months. He was wearing the plain dark blue of a working scholar. He had not changed it. He had walked up the steps of the audience chamber in the same robe he had been wearing the night we met at his residence. The senior eunuch had brought him a pale gold overrobe to put on for the ceremony. He had set it over his blue without changing the blue. He had looked, in it, exactly like himself. The emperor, when he placed the official seal in Bianjing's hand, had looked at him for a long moment. The emperor had not looked at him with pride. He had not looked at him with reluctance. He had looked at him with something else, something I read, from the back of the noble ranks, as recognition. The emperor had been looking, for some weeks, for a son to hand a tired old country to. He had not expected to find one in a small stooped scholar he had largely ignored for 22 years. He had found him. He had not asked himself, yet, how he had come to find him. He would ask. Eventually, Pei Wuxia and I had agreed, in our last meeting before the naming, that when the emperor asked, we would tell him most of the truth. Not all. Not the assassins. Not the boat. Not the maidservant. The shape of the truth. The emperor was an old soldier. He would understand what the shape of the truth meant. We were not yet ready to be asked. The emperor was old. He would die, by Lin Shuang's careful estimate, sometime in the next 2 years. He would die without ever needing to ask us. The asking, if it came, would come from Bianjing when he was emperor, and by then we would have answers. I will tell you, for the sake of completeness, a few of the things that happened in the months between the fourth prince's naming and the resolution of this story. The second prince Yen Wei tried, in the 3rd month after his mother's exile, to mount a kind of counter-coup. He did this badly. He did it badly because his mother was not there to do it for him, and because Pei Wuxia was not there to do it for him, and because his remaining advisors were the kind of men who had spent 4 years being told what to do by Pei Wuxia. He tried to bribe a captain of the Imperial Guard. The captain refused him. The captain was Chao Yi. Chao Yi, Pei Wuxia's man, had taken a posting in the Imperial Guard in the 2nd month, on Pei Wuxia's quiet recommendation, and had risen in it. He was now a senior captain. He had not been chosen by the second prince for the bribe attempt at random. He had been chosen because the second prince had been told, by a man we had placed in his household, that Chao Yi was the kind of soldier who would take any bribe. Chao Yi was not. Chao Yi refused. Chao Yi reported the attempt. The second prince, Yen Wei, was confined to his residence and reduced to a stipend. He was not killed. He had not killed anyone yet. He would not be permitted to. He sat, after that, in his residence, in a small private rage, with no army, no mother, no advisor, and 3 women who had been assigned to him by the palace for his comfort, and who did not, by their reports, find him good company. He turned to poetry. He was, by all later accounts, not a good poet. He lived. That is the most important thing about him. The crown prince Xie Yuan, in the 5th month, fell ill. He had been declining for some time. The illness, when it came, was a wasting one. He died in the autumn of that year, in his residence, with no one beside him except his old wet nurse, who had been the only person in his life who had loved him without calculation. He died, by all reports, quietly. Lin Shuang attended him in his last week, on the orders of the new crown prince. She told me afterward, in a small private exchange in Su Wanyu's courtyard, that he had been kind to her in those last days. That he had asked her, in his last lucid afternoon, whether the emperor still hated him. She had told him that the emperor did not hate him, and had never hated him, and had only been disappointed in him, which was a worse thing for him, but a better one for her to say. He had laughed at that, very weakly, and had thanked her. She had not told him that the emperor had visited him in the morning while he was asleep, and had sat by his bed for an hour. She had not told him because she had not been there. The emperor had not allowed anyone to see him sit. Princess Yongning began, in the 6th month, to attend court. She did not attend in the formal sense. She did not have a rank that allowed it. She attended in the sense that she walked, once a week, through the various halls and courtyards, in a plain dark green robe, with no servants, and stopped, at certain doors, to speak briefly with certain ministers. The ministers, after the 3rd such visit, began to expect her. They began to greet her by name. They began to ask, after the 7th visit, whether she would like a chair. She accepted. She drank tea with 3 ministers a week, on average, for the rest of that year. By the end of the year, there was not a senior minister in the great Yin who did not know her face and her voice and what she sounded like when she was disappointed. Yin Ruashi came up to the capital in the 7th month. She came on her own initiative. She wrote to Pei Wuxia 3 weeks before she arrived. She wrote that she had become tired of Yangzhou. She wrote that she had been informed, through certain channels she would explain when she arrived, that her adoptive brother had recently changed factions and that she would like to meet the new faction. She did not ask for permission. She arrived in a sedan chair with 2 maidservants and an old swordsman who had taught her to handle a knife when she was 11. She presented herself at the gate of Pei Wuxia's house. Pei Wuxia was not at home. Pei Wuxia was at the 4th prince's residence. The senior maid in his household, who had been instructed years ago about what to do if a young woman in a sedan chair ever arrived at the gate claiming to be Lady Yan, brought her in, fed her, and sent a message to Pei Wuxia. Pei Wuxia returned that evening. He spoke with her for 2 hours. He came to me afterward. He said, "She is here." "I see. She will need to meet you." "All right. You will like her." "I am sure I will." "She will not necessarily like you." "I will accept that." She did not. She did not, however, dislike me. We met in Su Wanyu's courtyard, with Su Wanyu present, and Yongning present, and Lin Shuang present in a corner reading a manual on Western herbs. Yin Ruashi was 23. She was small. She had a sharp, narrow face. She wore practical dark clothes. She had a knife at her hip. She sat down on the bench across from me. She looked at me for a long time. She said, "Master Xie, Lady Yin, my brother says I should know you. I am at your service. My brother says you are the only other strategist in the great Yin who is not, in the end, a fool. Your brother is generous. My brother does not flatter. He has, for some weeks, been telling me about you in letters that read almost the way his old training letters read. He has been doing this without realizing he is doing it. I would like to see whether he is right." "How would you like to see?" "I would like," she said, "a problem to work on. Today, in this room, I would like to see how you propose to solve it. And I would like to argue with you about your proposal. And I would like, at the end of an hour, to decide whether you and my brother together are correct that I should add myself to your work. What problem? Choose one." I thought. I turned to Su Wanyu. "My lady, the matter of the Southern Fleet refit." Su Wanyu raised an eyebrow. She produced from a small lacquer chest under the bench a folded sheaf of papers. She handed them to Yin Ruashi. Yin Ruashi unfolded them. She read them in silence for some minutes. The papers were the manifest of a proposed refit of the Southern Fleet that had been bogged down in the Ministry of Works for 6 months. The refit was being blocked by an undersecretary who had been bribed by a shipbuilder in Suzhou who did not wish to lose the contract for the older ships' continued maintenance. The block was costing the throne approximately 400,000 taels a year. It was not yet visible at the highest levels because the undersecretary was good at his work. Yin Ruashi looked up. "This will take an hour." "Yes. I will need wine." Yongning poured her wine. "We worked the problem. We worked it for the rest of the afternoon. We did not solve it in an hour. We solved it in 3. Yin Ruashi argued with me in the 2nd hour about the choice of intermediary I had proposed. She argued well. She changed my proposal in 2 places. She improved it in both. By the end of the 3rd hour, we had a plan that was, by my estimate, better than the one I had brought into the room. The plan would not be executed for another 4 weeks. It would, when executed, recover the 400,000 taels for the throne in the 1st year and 700,000 in the 2nd. At the end of the 3rd hour, Yin Ruashi set down her wine. "All right," she said. "All right. My brother is correct. You and he together, with me, are very dangerous. I am glad. Do not be too glad. I have not yet decided how to feel about it. You have a year to decide. I will take the year." She did. She stayed. She did not, that year or the next, move into Pei Wuxia's residence. She took a small house of her own 3 streets away. She kept her old swordsman and her 2 maidservants. She came to Su Wanyu's courtyard every 9 days, the same 9-day cycle on which I met with Pei Wuxia, and she worked problems with us. She and Pei Wuxia were closer than I had originally understood. They had been raised together for some years, in the Pei family of Yangzhou, before he had come up to the capital, and the bond between them was old. He had not protected her from me out of distance. He had protected her from me because she was the part of him that he loved before he had learned to love anything else. I came to be fond of her. Su Wanyu came to be fond of her. So did Yoning. So did Lin Xuan. So, eventually, did Mu Qingluan, who arrived in the 8th month at Su Wanyu's invitation, set down her teacup at the low table, looked around at the other women in the courtyard, and said, dryly, "I see, my lady. You have built a court." "Not a court," Su Wanyu had said. "A house." "A house," Mu Qingluan said. "With many rooms." Many rooms. Mu Qingluan had taken her tea. She had sat in a corner. She had not, in the months that followed, ever quite stopped being a guest. She did, however, find that she was, for the first time in her professional life, in a house where the women in it did not need her for what she was usually needed for. She found this disorienting. She also found it agreeable. By the end of the year, she had begun to make herself useful in a different way, organizing certain intelligence that came in from other houses, and Su Wanyu had begun, in private, to call her elder sister, which was the highest title Su Wanyu gave any woman, and which Mu Qingluan accepted with a small surprised stillness that I do not think she could have explained, if asked, even to herself. I tell you all of this because the women in my courtyards mattered to me. They will, you can see, sometimes return in this telling. They were not, however, ever quite the work of it. The work of it was outside, in the city, in the court, in the rooms where men were arranged. The work of it I did, every 9 days, with Pei Wuxia. The emperor died in the spring of the 2nd year. He died in his bed. He died in his sleep. He died in his own time, of his own age, with his old soldier's body finally giving up its long, stubborn watch. Lin Xuan was at his side. He had asked, in the months before, that she be the physician who attended him in his last days. He had asked because he had been told, by Bianjing, that she was a careful young woman who would not try to keep him alive past his usefulness. He had liked the phrase. He had said so. He had said it to her on the 3rd evening before his death, when she had come to give him a tincture for the cough that had finally begun to settle in his chest, and he had taken her hand briefly in his own dry one and had said, "Daughter, you will not keep me past my usefulness." And she had said, "No, Your Majesty, I will not." And he had nodded, and had told her that he was grateful. She told me about it the morning after he died. She told me dry-eyed. She had not yet cried for him. She would, later that day. She would do it in Su Wanyu's courtyard, sitting on the bench under the willow, with Su Wanyu beside her. She would do it briefly. She did not waste tears. Bianjing was crowned 10 days after his father's body was laid in the imperial tombs. The coronation was small. He had refused, in the months before his father's death, every proposal for a larger one. He had refused twice in a council meeting. He had refused a 3rd time in a private letter to the Ministry of Rights. He had told the senior minister, in the private letter, that the country would not be served by a coronation that exhausted the treasury, and that he would prefer to begin his reign by being seen to spend less than the country expected. He had been advised, by Pei Wuxia, that this would set a tone for the reign that could not be retreated from. He had said, "Yes, I would like to set that tone." He said it. He was crowned in a single afternoon in the audience chamber, with the senior officials present and no other guests. He wore the imperial yellow only for the ceremony itself. The rest of the day he wore the plain dark blue. He had taken, in the months between the naming and the coronation, exactly one personal ornament, a small jade pendant on a black cord at his neck, given to him by his sister Yongning, who had taken it from her mother's old jewel chest the morning he had agreed to accept the throne and had pressed it into his hand without saying anything. He wore the pendant for the rest of his reign. He wore it under his robes. Only Yongning, his physicians, and his old tutor Master Gao ever saw it. After the coronation, he held a small private dinner. The dinner was in the residence he had lived in as a prince. He had not yet moved into the imperial inner palaces. He had said he would not move into them until the autumn, because he wanted his father's belongings to remain where they were for another season. He invited 11 people. He invited his sister Yongning. He invited Master Gao. He invited his old wet nurse, who was 81 and lived in a small house near the southern gate. He invited Pei Wuxia. He invited Yin Ruoxi. He invited Chao Yi. He invited me. He invited Su Wanyu. He invited Lin Shuang. He invited Mu Qingluan. He invited the chief eunuch of the inner palace, who had served his father for 30 years and who had not, in the last 6 months, been allowed to do anything difficult. We sat at a long, low table in the east garden. There was a single brazier at each end of the table. There was a single dish of plain steamed fish in the center, and small bowls of rice, and a clear soup with greens, and a single wine, which was an ordinary southern rice wine of no particular distinction. He had ordered it that way. He had said, in the morning, that he would not, at his first meal as emperor, have anyone in the kitchens working harder than they would have worked any other night of the year. He served the wine himself. He poured it into each of our cups. He poured for the wet nurse last because she was the oldest, and he held her cup with both hands when he handed it back to her, the way a grandson holds anything he hands to a very old woman. He sat down. He picked up his cup. "Drink with me, please," he said. We drank. He set his cup down. He looked around the table. He looked at each of us for one long breath, in order, going around the table. He did not make a speech. He did not give thanks. He did not propose a toast. He looked, and he set his cup down again, and he picked up his chopsticks, and he began to eat. We ate. We ate slowly. We ate for some time. The old wet nurse fell asleep at the table, eventually, with her head on her own forearm, and the chief eunuch leaned over and laid a small blanket across her shoulders, and the dinner went on without her. Lin Shuang told a story about a horse she had owned as a child that had refused to be ridden. Yongning told a story about a court official who had once tried to bribe her with a poem. Yin Ruoxi argued with Pei Wuxia about a particular text of military history. Chao Yi did not speak, but laughed once when Pei Wuxia made the carp comparison observation about a minister he could no longer name aloud, and the laugh was a short, surprised one that I had not heard him make before. Mu Qingluan told no stories. She listened. She refilled Su Wanyu's wine cup 3 times. Su Wanyu drank exactly half of each refill and set it down. I did not speak much, either. I watched. I watched my new emperor eat his plain steamed fish and listen to his sister's old jokes and refill his old tutor's tea, and I watched my own wife laugh once, very softly, at a thing Yin Ruoxi said about a Tang general, and I watched Pei Wuxia, sitting at the corner opposite mine, lean back and let his shoulder touch Chao Yi's for 1/2 a breath under the lantern light. And I watched the small old wet nurse asleep with her cheek on her forearm and the blanket across her shoulders, and I felt, for the first time since I had opened my eyes in a wine-soaked room in the Quanhua Pavilion 2.5 years ago, that I had stopped running. I had not stopped working. I would not stop working. The next morning the work would resume. There were 30 matters in the new emperor's first month that had to be moved. There were several men who had served the second prince's faction who had not yet been placed in safe positions. There was the matter of the Western armies. There was the matter of the salt revenue. There was the matter of the Khitan, who would, hearing of the change of throne, push at the border within the year, and who would need to be answered. But on the night of that small dinner, I had stopped running. Pei Wuxia caught my eye across the table at the moment I noticed I had stopped. He raised his cup. He did not say anything. He raised it. I raised mine. We drank. Nobody at the table commented. Yongning saw us. She did not say anything either. She picked up her own cup. She raised it slightly. She drank. We finished the dinner. When we rose to go, I helped Xie Yuan with her cloak. Pei Wuxia helped Chao Yi with his. The chief eunuch lifted the wet nurse very gently from her chair and carried her, blanket and all, to a waiting sedan chair that would take her home. Master Gao took Yongning's arm, as he had done since she was 9, and they walked together to the gate. Bianjing stayed at the table. He stayed in the residence he had lived in as a prince for another season, because he had said he would. He raised his hand to each of us at the door. He did not stand to see us out. He looked tired. He looked, for a moment, very young. He looked at me last. He nodded. I nodded. I went home with Xie Yuan through the dark streets of Bianjing. The streets were dry. The willows along the river had begun to put out their first thin leaves. There were 2 boys on the river bridge throwing rice cakes at each other and laughing in the way that boys laugh on the first warm night of a year. Xie Yuan walked with her hand tucked under my elbow. She did not say anything. She did not need to. When we came in through our own gate, Mu Qingwan was waiting in the front courtyard. She had come on ahead. She had a candle in her hand. She lit our path through the second courtyard and into the third. She lit Xie Yuan into the back rooms. She came back a few minutes later. She stood in the doorway of my study. Master Xie. Yes. There is a great deal of work tomorrow. There is. Sleep first. I will. She closed the door. I heard her steps go down the corridor. I sat at my desk for some minutes more. I did not write anything. I did not draw anything. I sat in the small lamplight, and I looked at the wall. Half a stone, for birds. I had begun, 2.5 years ago, with that phrase. I had used it to mean a kind of cruelty, a kind of precision, a kind of cold pleasure in arrangements that hurt many enemies at small cost to myself. I had used it because the man whose body I had inherited had been about to die, and the only way I had known to keep him alive was to learn very quickly to hurt the people who wanted him dead. I had become, in the meantime, something that phrase did not quite describe. I had become a man with a wife who knew how to hold a knife and would not, when I went into the dark, ask me where. I had become a man with an emperor who would, every 9 days, set down his book and look at me and listen. I had become a man with a half-brother who, in the 3rd month after the coronation, would come to me, on his own, and would say, very quietly, that he had been thinking for some time, and that he would like to apprentice himself to the man who taught my courtyard women the knife. I had become a man with a stepmother who, in the years after, would not move against me again, and who would, in time, come to be afraid of me in a quiet way that I would, eventually, find a means to soften. I had become a man with a rival who, in another world, would have been my mortal enemy, and who in this one had become, without either of us using the word, ever, something close to a friend. I had become a man who, on a warm spring night, had stopped running. I blew out the candle. I went to bed. Xie Yuan was already asleep. She slept on her side, one hand under her cheek, the same way she had slept on our first night together. I lay down beside her. I did not touch her, because she did not like to be touched while she slept. I lay on my back, and I looked up at the dark ceiling, and I let my hands rest, palms down, on the quilt. I would wake in a few hours. There would be work. There was always going to be work. There was a new emperor in Bianjing. There was an old empire to mend. There was a man across the city whose mind I had finally stopped trying to outrun, because we had agreed to walk at the same pace. There were women in my courtyards I had not yet finished learning. There was a young half-brother who had decided to come back to himself. There was the rest of the years. I closed my eyes. I slept.